Hey guys, tonight's story begins with something crawling across your neck, a mattress that feels more like kindling than bedding, and a draft that smells suspiciously like livestock. You open your eyes to a ceiling beam leaning at an angle that suggests the builder was drunk or optimistic. There's no alarm clock, no Wi-Fi, no explanation. Just a bowl of gray sludge shoved into your hands by someone who looks like they've been chewing the same piece of bread since last winter. And somehow, this is breakfast. But before you get too cozy, take a second to gently tap that new hype button YouTube just added. It really does help little guys like me push through the algorithm. And take a second to like the video and subscribe. But only if you genuinely enjoy this strange little corner of quiet storytelling. And drop a comment with where you're listening from and what time it is for you. It's strangely comforting to know who else is drifting off with us around the world. Now get comfortable, let the day melt away, and we'll drift back together into the quiet corners of the past. You wake up to the sound of something scratching near your ear. At first, you think it's your alarm clock, but then you remember alarm clocks haven't been invented yet, and also you don't own a chicken. The scratching continues. You sit up, and the straw mattress crackles beneath you like a fire made of regret. Fleas leap dramatically off your blanket, which smells like damp wool and possibly onions. You swat at your arm and realize you've already lost the first battle of the day. Congratulations. It's medieval morning, and you're the buffet. The room around you is crooked, the kind of crooked that suggests the builder was drunk or deeply optimistic about gravity. A wooden beam slants across the ceiling like it's tired of working, and a single window lets in a shaft of light so dusty you could carve your name in it. The floorboards are uneven, and one of them creaks in a way that sounds like a goat sighing. Somewhere in the corner, something small scurries. Mouse, rat, or possibly a very ambitious beetle. It doesn't matter. It owns the room now. You swing your legs out of bed and instantly regret being alive. The floor is cold enough to make your toes question their contract with your body. You fumble for shoes, but what you find instead are wooden clogs that look less like footwear and more like instruments of medieval justice. They scrape against your heels with the tenderness of a cheese grater, but you put them on anyway because barefoot means tetanus, worms, or worse. Splinters from wood that has seen things. The air itself feels heavy, full of smoke from last night's fire and the faint perfume of livestock that apparently believe walls are optional. You cough once, twice, then decide breathing is overrated. You stumble toward the door, ducking beneath the beam that has been waiting centuries to smack someone shorter than average. It misses. You feel victorious for half a second before you trip on the threshold and fall face first into mud that smells suspiciously like pig. Outside, the village stretches before you in all its lopsided glory. Thatched roofs slump as though exhausted by existence, and chimneys belch smoke like tired dragons. Chickens strut freely, judging everyone, while a pig snorts at a pile of laundry and decides it's dinner. The rooster does not crow. He's awake, perched smugly on a fence post, but he clearly decided today is a silent protest. You respect his commitment to passive aggression. Your stomach growls, demanding coffee. There is no coffee. There will never be coffee. Instead, someone hands you a wooden bowl of porridge that has the texture of wet plaster and the flavor of disappointment. You stare into it, half expecting it to blink back. It doesn't, but it does jiggle in a way that suggests it has opinions. You take a bite, and it sticks to your spoon, with such determination you wonder if you've accidentally invented glue. An old man nearby eats his portion with a look of grim endurance, chewing slowly like he's counting down the years of his sentence. As you choke down the second spoonful, a dog wanders by, eyeing your breakfast with pity. This is not a hungry dog. This is a dog who has eaten better meals than you. He leaves without begging, which feels personal. A woman shuffles past, carrying a bucket of water that sloshes over her feet, but she doesn't flinch. You wonder if her toes are numb or if she's simply made peace with perpetual dampness. Behind her, two children chase each other with sticks, one of which is clearly on fire. No one intervenes. An old woman nods approvingly from a bench, wrapped in shawls and judgment. You realize with dawning horror that she is already judging you too, taking in your clumsy steps, your strange clothes, your inability to eat glue porridge with dignity. She leans over to her companion and whispers something that makes them both cackle. You don't need to know the words. The tone says enough. You are the morning entertainment. The smell intensifies as the village wakes. Smoke, manure, wet straw, sweat, and bread all collide in the air like badly mixed perfume. Your modern lungs beg for filtered air, but all you get is a cough and the faint taste of ash. Somewhere nearby, a hammer strikes metal in a rhythm that feels like it's mocking your heartbeat. The blacksmith is already working, sweat dripping down his arms, sparks flying like tiny fireworks. He curses with such precision, you suspect he's been rehearsing. You try to walk down the main path, but every step is a gamble. The mud clings like a jealous lover, and when you finally free one foot, it splashes up your leg with a wet slap that feels both personal and vindictive. A chicken flaps at your face, offended by your existence. A goat eyes your sleeve like it's edible. A child licks a fence post. You don't know why. No one stops him. You realize this is normal here, which is somehow worse. You glance back at the house you woke in, hoping maybe it will look cozier from the outside. It doesn't. It looks like it's been gently collapsing for the last 100 years. Smoke curls lazily from the chimney, and you swear the roof sighs in relief that you left. A passing farmer nods at you in greeting, then spits into the mud with the accuracy of an archer. You nod back, trying to look like you belong, but he stares at your posture like it's an insult to the soil. You tell yourself you'll survive. One day. Just one day. No problem. But as the rooster finally coughs out a pathetic half-crow, the baker's boy trips over a bucket, and the old women cackle again. You realize the truth. You are not built for this. You are soft, spoiled, and already missing Wi-Fi like it was a childhood friend. You might make it until lunch, maybe, but by sunset, you'll be bargaining with saints you don't believe in for a hot shower and a bag of Doritos. And still, the village carries on, indifferent to your suffering. Boots thud, smoke rises, cows chew. The world turns, crooked and stubborn. You stand there, mud-splattered and flea-bitten, staring at the rooster, who still refuses to crow properly. He stares back with beady contempt, and you both know the same thing. You wouldn't last a day. The first thing you notice about breakfast is that it looks less like food and more like a construction project. A wooden bowl is shoved into your hands before you can even ask what's inside. The porridge glares up at you, thick, lumpy, and steaming like it has unfinished business. It doesn't move when you tilt the bowl. It doesn't even tremble. It just sits there, gray and immovable, daring you to try. You dip your spoon in, and it bends slightly under the weight, like it has given up on life. The porridge clings to the wood with the determination of a barnacle. You tug. It resists. Somewhere in the back of your mind, you wonder if you're about to eat food or cement. You lift a cautious spoonful to your mouth and immediately regret being alive. It tastes like wet oats, ashes, and despair. There's a faint crunch you can't identify. Maybe a seed. Maybe a pebble. Maybe divine punishment. You chew with the enthusiasm of someone gnawing on cardboard. Across the table, an old man with a beard thick enough to hide small birds chews his own porridge slowly, his eyes dead to the world, his jaw grinding like a millstone. He swallows, sighs, and keeps going, not because he wants to, but because survival demands it. You imitate him, spooning more in, each bite heavier than the last, like swallowing memories you didn't want. Just as you're about to force down another mouthful, someone slaps a wooden mug in front of you. It sloshes with dark ale, foamy and pungent, and the man who brought it grins like he's just given you medicine. For hydration, he says. It's 6 in the morning. You stare at the mug, the liquid reflecting your future, and realize your options are porridge that could patch a castle wall or beer that tastes like yeast arguing with itself. You take a sip. It burns slightly, not in the pleasant way, but in the way that reminds you you're drinking something brewed in barrels cleaned with wishes. The man claps your back so hard you nearly spit it out. Good for the blood, he says, while looking suspiciously pale himself. The smell of breakfast surrounds you, a choking mixture of smoke, sweat, and oats. A woman stirs a pot nearby, muttering curses under her breath at a porridge bubble that refuses to pop. Her husband gnaws on bread so dense you hear his teeth clicking in protest. Across the room, a child dips a finger into his bowl, decides against eating it, and instead smears the paste on the wall like mortar. It sticks, strongly. You make a note to avoid leaning against that wall for the rest of the day. Meanwhile, a dog sits nearby, watching with judgmental eyes. Its fur is patchy, its ribs visible, but somehow it still looks better fed than you. The dog yawns, licks its paw, and turns away from your bowl like even it has standards. When the dog refuses your food, you know you're in trouble. Around you, villagers eat in silence, broken only by chewing and the occasional grunt. An old woman with no teeth gums her porridge with terrifying efficiency. A boy with straw-colored hair slurps his oats so loudly you wonder if he's trying to summon something. A man in the corner dips bread into his ale, bites down, and grimaces like he's reconsidering every choice that led him here. You want to laugh, but then you remember you're part of this now. The bread, when it arrives, is no savior. It is heavy, stale, and looks like it might double as a weapon in a tavern brawl. You pick up a chunk, tap it against the table, and it makes a dull thud. You attempt a bite. Your teeth complain. You try again, twisting your jaw at an unnatural angle, and manage to break off a piece that tastes faintly of dust and sorrow. A farmer across the table nods approvingly, as if surviving the bread is a rite of passage. You nod back, your mouth too busy calculating the odds of dental collapse. A boy sneaks past, carrying a bowl of something steaming. It smells suspiciously like meat. Your eyes follow him. He notices and clutches it tighter, glaring at you with the suspicion of someone guarding treasure. The smell lingers, taunting you, reminding you that you will not taste bacon this century. You sigh into your porridge, and it sighs back, releasing a puff of steam that smells faintly of burnt socks. The ale keeps coming, because apparently hydration means intoxication. Each sip dulls the edges of your misery, but it also makes the room tilt slightly. The villagers laugh more loudly now, their faces red, their bowls emptier, their mugs fuller. One man slaps his thigh and declares the porridge not bad today, which is perhaps the saddest compliment ever given to food. Another woman toasts to surviving winter, her mug spilling foam onto the floor. A child steals the foam and licks it from the dirt. No one stops him. You decide to stop noticing things for the sake of your sanity. By the time you reach the bottom of your bowl, the porridge has solidified into something unmovable. You scrape at it with your spoon, but it refuses to budge, cemented in place like a relic. You give up, pushing the bowl away, and hope no one notices. They notice. An old man smirks, mutters something about soft hands, and goes back to gnawing bread with his gums. The smell of smoke thickens as more fires are stoked. Someone sneezes loudly into their sleeve and keeps eating. Another man belches so violently his wife swats him with a ladle, then continues serving him seconds. You take another sip of ale to hide your horror. The dog circles back, hopeful now, but when you offer it your bowl, it sniffs once and trots away, unimpressed. Even the dog knows you wouldn't last. You slump against the table, your stomach heavy, your throat dry, your soul craving coffee that does not exist. Breakfast has ended, not with satisfaction, But with resignation, the villagers rise, wiping their mouths, tying aprons, pulling on boots. You rise too, slower, weaker, already longing for something better. This is the start of your day, and already you're losing. It begins with the breeze, a gentle shift in the air, a whisper of movement through the village square, and suddenly your nose is under siege, not assaulted. That implies something fast, brutal, possibly survivable. No, this is slower, more insidious. A creeping horror that starts as a tickle in the nostrils and ends in full nasal despair. It's not one smell. It's a chorus. Sweat, smoke, manure, fermented goat. A hint of fish, somehow always nearby even when no fish are in sight. The ghost of cabbage past. The tang of old leather, soaked in dreams and rainwater. It is, in short, the scent of the era, and it's clinging to your soul. You attempt to adjust. You try breathing through your mouth, but that only invites new horrors. The taste of the air is somehow worse, like licking the inside of a used boot. You try shallow breathing, like you're practicing meditation, but all that earns you is lightheadedness and a reminder that there is no zen in this century. There's only funk. The people here don't notice, or they do, but they've given up. A woman passes you, carrying a basket of turnips and pride, her armpits radiating an aroma so complex it deserves its own crest. She nods politely, her hair matted into what might be a braid or might be a nest. You return the nod, too stunned to speak, your eyes watering gently. The village children are worse. Small, sticky, and feral. They carry with them the distilled essence of mud, sugar beets, and lies. One of them runs past you barefoot, trailing the smell of pond water and unbrushed teeth. You hadn't considered the teeth yet. That was your mistake. You catch your first glimpse of a smile and immediately wish you hadn't. It's not the crookedness that gets you, though that's impressive. More angles than geometry class. But the color. Teeth here range from dull ivory to full ambergris, with some featuring bonus black spots that may or may not be alive. Gums are swollen and enthusiastic. Breath is weaponized. A man laughs near you, and you physically flinch. It's not a conscious reaction. Your body is trying to escape itself. You ask about hygiene, and the response is a cheerful shrug. Cleanliness, it turns out, is mostly symbolic. Water is for drinking, sometimes. Baths are for saints, babies, and people who've recently encountered death. You, unfortunately, are still considered too alive for any of the above. Eventually, you find the bathhouse. That's generous. It's a barrel. A large wooden barrel filled with tepid water and floating mystery. It's been reused several times. You know this because the water is opaque and smells like boiled humanity. You hesitate. A nearby monk, toothless and serene, urges you in. Cleanse thyself, he says, as though this is holy. You dip a toe. It comes out coated in something film-like. You consider leaving your skin behind and starting over. The soap is handed to you in a lump. It is gray. It is greasy. It smells faintly of campfire and bacon. Lye and fat, the monk says proudly. You rub it between your hands, and it produces something that might be bubbles, or might be lathered regret. It leaves a residue that squeaks. You scrub. The soap doesn't so much clean you as confuse your skin. Dirt is moved around but never leaves. Your arms now smell of smoke and pig. The rest of you joins in soon after. When you finish, you are no cleaner, just wetter and colder and deeply suspicious of your pores. The villagers, however, are alarmed. You emerge from the barrel steaming, pink, and slightly glowing with unfamiliarity. An old woman crosses herself. A boy screams and runs. A man drops his onion. Someone whispers the word, witch. You assure them you are not. You smile too widely. They recoil. You are not invited to bathe again. The result is resignation. You fall into the rhythm. You begin to stink. It's not immediate, but it's inevitable. One day you notice your tunic smells like cheese, not fresh cheese, the kind that's been forgotten in a warm room. You try to hang it near the fire to air out, but it just toasts the funk into permanence. Your boots develop their own weather pattern. Your hair begins to stiffen, forming peaks and valleys. You scratch your scalp and something flakes off. You don't investigate. Toothbrushing is done with a stick, if at all. Some people chew herbs, others chew twigs. A few don't bother and simply chew on their own thoughts. You try a stick. It tastes like bark, which makes sense. It does not, however, improve anything. You swirl some ale in your mouth for good measure, pretending it's mouthwash. It's not. Now, your breath smells like barley and failure. You think you hit rock bottom when a chicken avoids you. You reach out to pet it, because you are desperate for affection. And it moves away, offended. Chickens do not have high standards. This one, apparently, has found its line. Later, a dog licks your hand, then immediately licks a rock, clearly trying to recalibrate. People begin calling you ripe. They say it with affection, but it feels pointed. You catch sight of yourself in a still puddle and flinch. Your reflection blinks slower now. Your pores are vast and lawless. You wipe your face and something peels. You pretend you didn't see it. You give up on socks. They're always damp. Your cloak begins to smell like it has emotions, and those emotions are betrayal. You no longer recoil at the village air. You've joined it. You're part of the scentscape now. You are the smell situation. One morning, someone hands you a bunch of dried lavender. For carrying, they say, not eating. You nod, tie it to your belt, and inhale deeply. The smell is faint, overwhelmed by your own musk. Still, you keep it close. It's the only hope you have left. You walk through the square, head high, stink proud. No one flinches anymore. You have been absorbed. You are of the village now, baptized not in fire or water, but in body odor and apathy. The wind shifts again. You raise your chin. You sniff. You identify 4 separate types of cow dung. You begin to wonder if maybe this is enlightenment. You find your clothes folded neatly by the fire, which is generous, considering they look like they've already been through a flood, a famine, and possibly a duel. The tunic is rough-spun wool, the color of sadness. It crunches when you pick it up, like it holds secrets in hay. You shake it out and dust flies into your face, which would be fine if it were just dust, but it smells like it might have been part of a barn wall at some point. The trousers aren't so much tailored as they are aggressively rectangular. You have no idea where the front island. You guess, and you guess wrong. Putting them on is like climbing into a bag of warm gravel. The fabric has no stretch, no give, and absolutely no interest in accommodating your soft modern knees. It scratches instantly, the kind of itch that feels like a punishment. You do a little dance trying to settle in, a hip-hop of desperation and denial. There is no escape. The wool is everywhere now. It's inside your soul. The undergarments are not better. There's linen, technically, but it's a loose term. It's more like gauze with an ego, and it's tied together with strings that seem strategically placed to trip you later. Everything is laced. You have never laced so many things in your life. You lace the shirt. You lace the trousers. You lace your dignity together and hope it holds. The outer tunic is heavier, coarser, and somehow even more committed to making you reconsider every life decision. It smells faintly of fire, mildew, and something agricultural. You are now wearing 3 layers, and not a single one is breathable. You feel like a boil-and-bag dinner, a walking stew. The air outside is cool, but inside your clothes is a hot, itchy inferno. Then come the shoes. They are clogs, wooden clogs. You knew this theoretically, but the reality is so much worse. They are not shaped for human feet. They are not shaped for feet at all. They are shaped like boxes cursed by a vengeful carpenter. You slip them on, and instantly your arches scream. Your heels revolt. The tops of your toes whisper goodbye. Every step sounds like someone slamming a drawer. The village echoes with your suffering. You walk 3 steps and develop a limp. You walk 5 and consider amputation. Your cloak, the final touch, is wool again, coarse, damp, decorated with suspicious stains. It flaps around you like a judgmental grandmother and smells like old soup. The clasp is broken, so you tie it in a knot that somehow tightens the more you breathe. You are now fashionably strangled. You look around to see if anyone else is struggling, but the villagers wear their outfits like second skin. Tattered, muddy skin, but skin nonetheless. A woman scrubs laundry with arms the size of tree trunks, her dress tucked and pinned in ways that defy engineering. A man sharpens a scythe in a tunic so stained it's practically camouflage. A child wears what appears to be a tablecloth with sleeves. Everyone looks itchy, but no one complains. Complaining is for people with options. You try to adjust your collar, and a small twig falls out. You're not even surprised. The fabric chafes your neck with every movement, each step a new opportunity for irritation. You're sweating in places you didn't know had pores. You lift your arm and discover your own scent is beginning to evolve. You're not even sure it's bad anymore. It's just medieval. A passing farmer compliments your cloak. You beam. Finally, a win. Then he points to the knot and says, "Tied like a dead chicken." You don't know what that means, but it doesn't feel like praise. You try to fix it, but now it's too tight. You twist, yank, and suddenly the whole thing slides sideways, half cape, half snare trap. You give up and let it dangle. At least now your left arm is free to fight off the squirrels that will inevitably mistake you for a food pile. The hat, if you can call it that, is a woolen cone. You jam it on and it immediately begins to slide backward, like even it doesn't want to be involved. It flattens your hair in the front and puffs it out in the back, giving you the silhouette of a sad wizard. A child giggles when they see you. A dog sneezes. You try to stand tall, but your wooden shoes betray you with every step, clicking like castanets in a horror movie. You attempt to run. Just a little jog, just to feel alive. But the clogs catch in a rut, and you lurch forward like a puppet whose strings were suddenly cut. You regain balance with a windmill of arms, cloak spinning, hat flying off into a nearby puddle. You're now muddy, panting, and wearing roughly 4 pounds of wet wool. A peasant woman walks by carrying a basket of turnips and doesn't even blink. You realize this level of chaos is just background noise here. You could burst into flames and someone would probably just mutter something about the weather and keep walking. You retrieve your hat. It smells worse now, like wet regret. You try to tuck in your tunic, but it bunches, creating a lumpy silhouette that makes you look like a pregnant gourd. The belt doesn't help. It's leather, cracked and stiff, and the buckle bites your stomach every time you bend. You tighten it anyway, because otherwise everything slides around like you're wearing medieval pajamas. The belt cuts off circulation. You tell yourself it's fine. This is what fashion feels like. You step out into the village square, a creature of cloth and compromise. Your arms chafe when they move. Your thighs are already in a wool-based feud. You feel 10 degrees too hot and 40 years too old. Everything itches. You walk like you've just wrestled a scarecrow and lost. The townspeople don't notice, or if they do, they say nothing. You're just one more smelly, shuffling mass in a sea of burlap and existential dread. Someone calls out to you to help with the hay cart. You nod, then realize you physically cannot bend at the waist anymore. The belt prevents it. The tunic restricts it. The cloak mocks it. You hobble toward the cart, a wheezing tapestry of discomfort, clogs clacking against the stones. Your hat slips again. You stop to fix it. A goose honks at you. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbles. Or maybe that's just your knee. It's hard to tell. You're dressed now. Badly. But dressed. And that's what matters. Probably. The bucket looks innocent enough at first. It sits beside the crooked doorway, wooden and weathered, with a rope handle that's frayed in all the places rope shouldn't be frayed. You think, naively, that this is fine. You've carried things before. Once, you moved a couch. That was heavy. This is just a bucket. A single, solitary bucket. You lift it. It is empty. It is still somehow already heavier than your self-esteem. You take a breath and begin the walk to the well, which, for reasons that can only be described as sadistic, is nowhere near the house. The path is uneven and actively trying to kill you. Roots jut up like gnarled fingers. Stones shift beneath your wooden clogs, which are not, despite their impressive clack, known for stability. You walk like someone learning to dance on stilts. The chickens watch you from the fence. They do not blink. You pretend not to be intimidated. The well is old. Of course it's old. Everything is old here. But the well is especially ancient, hunched under a crooked roof, creaking like it has opinions. You throw the rope in, hand over hand, spinning the crank until you hear the faint splash of water that is definitely colder than joy. Then you haul. You haul like your ancestors are watching. The bucket comes up slowly, sloshing, and by the time it crests the well edge, your arms feel like licorice ropes left out in the Sunday. You grab the handle. Immediate regret. The weight of the water is biblical. You try to hoist it, but the bucket stays planted like a smug tree. When you finally manage to swing it forward, it sloshes, soaking your feet and reminding you that your shoes are made of sponge-grade wood. You begin the return trip, carrying the bucket 2 inches off the ground with arms that tremble like overcooked noodles. By the time you reach the house again, you are sweating in ways you didn't think possible. You try to set the bucket down gently. It falls like a comet. A third of the water spills, and a nearby chicken shrieks in offense. You apologize to it, out loud. You're not sure who you are anymore. The chicken does not forgive you. In fact, it approaches. Slowly, menacingly. You don't know much about poultry, but you know this bird wants your kneecaps. It squawks, flaps its wings once, and charges. You panic, flail your arms, and shout something incoherent about friendship. The chicken is unmoved. You run. It follows. Your clogs betray you again, catching on a loose stone, and you stumble forward with all the grace of a falling cabinet. You land hard, your cloak flipping over your head, and the chicken, satisfied, pecks your boot once and struts away. You lay there for a moment, rethinking everything. Eventually, you rise, dust yourself off, and try to find the cow. The cow, unlike the chicken, does not chase you. She waits in the pasture, chewing cud with the energy of someone who knows she's in charge. You call to her gently. She snorts. You approach with a hesitant smile. She lifts her head and stares directly into your soul. You hold out a hand. She snorts again, louder this time. A full-body exhalation that seems to say, I know what you are. You attempt to milk her. You have never done this before. You are optimistic for no reason. You place the stool. You place the bucket. You sit. You reach. She kicks. The bucket tips. The stool skids. You nearly go with it. You blink twice and try again. This time, you manage to aim, squeeze, and produce exactly one sad stream of milk that barely dribbles into the bucket before going wildly off course and spraying your already cursed tunic. The cow, unimpressed, begins to urinate with impressive volume and timing. You move the bucket. You move yourself. You apologize. The cow does not care. Somewhere, a rooster crows, even though the morning has already started. You suspect it just enjoys the noise. You wipe your hands on your cloak and realize you've only finished one chore. You have more, many more. You are told to gather eggs next. You are not told that this will involve more poultry combat. The hens guard their nests like tiny feathered dragons. You reach into a coop, get pecked. You try again. Pecked harder. You try a third time and are met with a wing-flapping fury that knocks your hat clean off your head and into the mud. Eventually, you retrieve 3 eggs and half your dignity. Someone yells at you to chop wood. You follow the voice to a pile of logs so large it might qualify as a small hill. You are handed an axe that weighs more than your torso. You swing once. It bounces. You swing again. It sticks. You try to pull it out and nearly dislocate your shoulder. The villagers walk by and nod in that way people do when they're watching a slow, inevitable disaster. One of them offers you a weak smile and says, "You'll get it eventually." You won't. By the time midday approaches, you've spilled water, failed at eggs, angered livestock, lost a duel with a chicken, and produced approximately a tablespoon of milk. Your hands are blistered, your back aches, and your clothes are fused to your skin with a combination of sweat, mud, and defeat. And the worst part is, no one else seems tired. A boy half your size is hauling 2 full buckets like it's nothing. An old woman is wringing laundry with hands made of raw stone. A man is stacking logs with the focus of a monk and the muscles of a legend. You, meanwhile, are just trying not to cry into a pile of damp straw. You sit down on a crooked bench, boots squelching, arms limp. A chicken wanders past you, casting a glance over its shoulder like it knows. The cow moos in the distance, a low, mocking tone. Congratulations. You've made it through the morning. You are already tired. The village wakes up not all at once, but in a gradual groan, like an old man stretching his back and remembering taxes exist. There's no alarm clock. Only the distant bray of a donkey with personal issues and a rooster who screams as if it's being chased by its own existential dread. You hear it and sit up, sore in places you never knew had muscles, the wooden clogs by your feet already filled with damp straw, and one bold beetle who refuses to vacate. You wiggle your toes at it. It wiggles back. You lose the staring contest. You step outside just in time to be hit with a wall of sensory chaos. Smoke curls lazily from chimneys that seem to breathe. Somewhere nearby, someone's burning something. Probably wood, possibly lunch, maybe regrets. The air is thick with damp earth, pig funk, and ambition. It's not exactly a morning walk. It's more like being mugged by smells. Your first stop is the well again, which feels less like fetching water and more like accepting your fate. But you never make it to the bucket because the old women are already there, and they have declared this morning a tribunal. They sit like sentries, wrapped in layers of wool and opinions. One knits aggressively, clicking her needles like the executioner sharpens his axe. Another peels potatoes, the same potato, slowly, ominously, as she narrows her eyes at you. They don't speak right away. They sip their tea, or maybe it's broth or soup, or just very old rainwater, and they look. You greet them with a smile that feels too wide and entirely fake. They do not smile back. One squints harder. The knitter leans in slightly and sniffs. The peeling woman raises one thin eyebrow, as though she has just found you lacking on a cellular level. Then, finally, they begin. "City hands," one declares. You look down at your palms, which are indeed blistered and soft and slightly sticky from a failed attempt to carry jam yesterday. Another chimes in. "And that hat's crooked. Looks like it's trying to run off your head." The third doesn't say anything but lets out a long, low sigh, like she's disappointed on behalf of the entire village, possibly the entire century. They do not stop. They pick apart your posture, your shoes, the way you hold your bucket, wrong, and the color of your cloak, too cheerful. They discuss you like you're not there, weaving their insults into tales of who was caught kissing who behind the granary, and which villager is definitely hiding a secret pig in his cellar. Their words swirl around you like smoke, clinging tighter than your tunic. You retreat with your bucket and your wounded pride. Further down the lane, the baker is already cursing at his oven. He has flour in his eyebrows and the expression of a man who has fought yeast and lost. Smoke seeps from the open door as he pulls out a tray of what might once have been bread, now better suited as weapons. He mutters oaths with the rhythm of poetry, each one more creative than the last, somehow involving both saints and turnips. He sees you watching and hands you a blackened lump. "Breakfast," he says. You chew it. It fights back. Children run past, shrieking, wild-eyed and feral, arms covered in something that is either berry juice or blood. You do not ask. One of them is licking a fence post with the dedication of a scholar. Another pelts you with a small apple and vanishes into a haystack. You hear them giggle from inside like it's a war crime. A dog barks. A goat screams. A pig wanders by with the confident stride of someone late to a meeting but unconcerned about consequences. The blacksmith's forge bellows across the road, firelight flashing from within like a dragon belching in time with metal music. You approach, just to observe, and are immediately greeted with a blast of heat and the steady clang of iron punishment. The blacksmith is a mountain of a man, beard singed at the edges, arms like tree trunks, and vocabulary that could peel paint. He works in a kind of dance, bang, twist, hiss, accompanied by muttered curses and the occasional grunt of approval. He sees you gawking. He does not stop. Instead, he hands you tongs and says, "Hold this." You do. It's heavier than despair. He gestures at a glowing piece of metal, red and angry, and says something unintelligible over the roar. You nod. You have no idea what you just agreed to. He hammers. Sparks fly into your face. You close your eyes and pray to whoever's listening. When it's over, your ears ring, your cloak is singed, and your hands are trembling. The blacksmith claps you on the back. You nearly collapse. You wander away with the vague sense that you may now be married to iron. By now, the village is fully alive. A cart rumbles past, pulled by an ox that stares at you like it knows your credit score. A man barters over onions like they're rare jewels. A woman dumps chamber pots out a window with the grace of a waterfall made of regret. You dodge too late. Your cloak suffers another indignity. A rooster picks a fight with a cat. The cat wins. The rooster pretends it was never in the fight to begin with. And you, standing in the middle of it all, realize something important. This is not peaceful. This is not the romanticized, candle-lit, lute music, everyone sits on barrels version of the past. This is chaos. Loud, smelly, busy, endless chaos. Smoke hangs in the air, kids shriek like banshees, pigs scream for no reason, and the old women at the well are probably still discussing your hat. This isn't a quiet life. This is a noisy, itchy, relentless performance of survival. You adjust your crooked hat. The wind steals it again. You sigh and chase it into a puddle. The village watches. No one helps. Life goes on. Reluctantly, so do you. The market begins with a bell. An old rusted thing that sounds like a cow giving up. And then it's just bodies. Moving, yelling, sweating bodies crammed together in a dusty, chaotic tangle of stalls, carts, and livestock with questionable boundaries. You step in cautiously, clutching the small cloth pouch of coins you were given like it contains secrets, because it does. Secrets and 3 copper pieces that apparently mean less than a decent turnip around here. Your first mistake is assuming money matters. You approach a woman selling apples, bright red, and stacked in a woven basket like little lies. You hold out a coin, trying to look confident and local. She squints at it like it's a dead bug. Then she looks at you with the same expression. "We're not Romans," she says flatly. "You don't know what that means." She clarifies. "Eggs or butter, or a good knife if you've got one." You don't have any of those things. You have exactly 0 eggs, unless you count the possibility that one might still be hidden in your hair from the morning chicken incident. You back away slowly, coin still in hand, and bump into a man pushing a cart full of onions that smell like regret. He glares at you. You apologize. He sneezes violently in response, and something lands on your arm. You wipe it off with your already dirty sleeve and press on. The shouting is constant. Sellers yelling prices that seem to fluctuate based on who's asking, buyers yelling counteroffers, animals yelling just to join the chorus. Somewhere nearby, a child is screaming about cheese. You don't know if it's joy or terror. A sheep breaks loose from a pen and someone yells, "Thief," and you don't know if they mean the sheep or the child chasing it. You try another stall, this one displaying hunks of questionable meat hanging from iron hooks. The butcher is enormous, red-faced, and sharpening a cleaver with a look that says he's seen things. You ask about a small cut of meat, pointing politely and offering a coin. He laughs so hard he nearly chokes. "That'll buy you the smell of it," he says. Maybe. You consider asking what it would take to buy something real, but the cleaver glints in the sun, and you decide you don't need meat that badly. You smile and back away, bumping into a barrel of pickled eels. One slithers slightly. You leave. By now, you're sweating through every layer of wool you own, which is all of them. Your clogs are full of dust and regret. You spot a stall selling fish and approach it with low expectations. The man behind the table has one eye, 4 teeth, and the disposition of a damp sponge. The fish laid out before him are somehow both wet and dry at the same time. One of them is still twitching. You make eye contact with it. It blinks. You swear it blinks. It knows what you are. You ask if the fish is fresh. The man snorts. "Caught this morning," he says, still angry about it. He pokes it. It flops violently. You take a step back. You buying or staring? You don't know. You don't want to touch it, but it seems like touching you is very much on the table. You say no, thank you. The man shrugs and starts humming to the fish like it's a lullaby. You leave quickly. In a brief moment of hope, you spot a stall with cloth. Real cloth, dyed in faded but still recognizable colors. You think maybe you could trade for something. A scarf, a scrap, anything not made of itch and shame. But before you even reach the stall, a goat on a rope, tied to the leg of the table, lunges forward and bites your cloak. You shriek. The vendor laughs. The goat tugs. You tug back. The goat wins. The vendor calls it inventory loss. You spend the next 10 minutes trying to shake goat saliva from your shoulder. The market does not pause. The sun rises higher. The smell of sweat and onions thickens, and someone starts playing a lute in the worst possible key. You find yourself in front of a stall selling herbs. The woman running it eyes you carefully and asks if you're cursed. You say no. She nods, clearly disappointed. You buy a single dried sprig of something just to feel like you've accomplished something, even though you're pretty sure it's just grass with a name. And then it happens. The goose. You never see it approach. One moment you're standing near a stack of baskets, trying to remember what you came here for, and the next you feel a presence. A heavy, judgmental presence. You turn slowly. It is there. It is large. It is white. It is breathing like a threat. You try to walk. It follows. You turn a corner. It turns the corner. You break into a jog. It waddles faster. People stare. No one helps. A child points and says, "It likes you," in the tone one might use when observing a haunting. You try to hide behind a stall. The goose honks so loudly your ears ring. It emerges from the other side of the barrel, like a specter. You don't know what it wants. You don't know what you've done. You only know it's watching. You run. The goose follows. By the time you reach the edge of the market, you are panting, flustered, and somehow missing a shoe. The goose stands at a distance, victorious. You stumble home, and it follows for a bit, then stops near a puddle and stares after you with the intensity of a creature who will one day return. When you reach your door, hands empty, stomach growling, shirt stained with a variety of market fluids, you collapse onto the bench outside. You have no eggs. You have no meat. You have nothing but a sprig of possibly useless herb, one shoe, and a bruise you didn't earn fairly. You look down the path. The goose is still there. You close the door, slowly, quietly. You'll figure out dinner later. Maybe. The sun has climbed high enough to make your sweat meaningful. Not in a spiritual way, more in a, you now smell like regret and damp wool way. You're trying to sit still outside the cottage, a strategic rest disguised as taking in the scenery. But all you can actually take in is the thick scent of livestock, peat smoke, and the faint but persistent odor of something rotting that no one else seems concerned about. You suspect it's a rat. You hope it's a rat. The alternatives spiral quickly into folklore. A small child runs past you, barefoot and coated in a mysterious substance that might be jam, might be blood, and probably includes at least one unlisted ingredient. They pause just long enough to look you dead in the eye, reach up, and wipe their nose directly across the hem of your tunic. Not maliciously, not even with any real intention, just casually, like you're a napkin, like this is the natural order of things. You lock eyes for a moment, they blink, then sprint off again, laughing, trailing a sticky smear of you behind them. You want to scream, but that requires energy. Instead, you stand and wipe your tunic on itself, which achieves exactly nothing, and decide it's time to attempt a basic hygiene check. Not because anyone expects it. On the contrary, you're starting to suspect they actively discourage it, but because you're one nose wipe away from unraveling as a person. There is no bathroom. Obviously. There is, however, a bucket of water that's been sitting out since dawn and now smells slightly like old lettuce and boiled shoe. You dip your hands in and splash your face. It is not refreshing. It is punishment. You consider rinsing your mouth, but remember, too late, that your toothbrush, if you can even call it that, was last seen under the bed being chewed by something with glowing eyes. You spot a village boy nearby, vigorously gnawing on a twig like it owes him money. You watch, horrified, as he dips the end of the twig into a little clay pot and brushes his teeth with what appears to be curdled milk. He sees you watching and gives a wide yellow grin. "Sour goat's good for plaque," he says proudly. Then he spits into the dirt, wipes his mouth with his sleeve, and skips away, leaving you with the kind of emotional damage that lingers for years. You reach into your cloak pocket and pull out what passes for deodorant in this century. A clump of moss wrapped in a linen scrap, handed to you by a woman with no teeth but very strong opinions about personal fragrance. "Rub it where the devil sweats," she'd said, cackling. You still don't know what that means. You sniff the moss. It smells like damp bark and betrayal. You dab it under your arms, trying to avoid the scratches left by your tunic's seams. Your skin is already raw from the morning's activities, and the moss reacts like sandpaper soaked in bitter tea. You soldier through, quietly humming to distract yourself. You are a modern soul with a medieval problem. Your neighbor, a cheerful man with 3 fingers and a suspiciously clean beard, walks by carrying a basket of laundry that looks only slightly less dirty than it probably did before. He sees you mid-moss application and nods. "That'll keep the lice off," he says. You did not know lice were part of the conversation. He continues walking, whistling a tune that might be about death. You retreat inside the cottage, which smells no better than the outside. The straw bed is damp again, and you're fairly certain the fleas are regrouping. You consider changing clothes, but the concept of clean is theoretical at this point. You pick up your other tunic, the one that smells less like a barn and more like moldy parchment, and hold it to your face. You gag. You put it back down. Outside, a woman scrubs her feet in a basin of gray water, then uses the same water to rinse her husband's shirt. You make a note not to borrow anything ever again. You attempt to tidy your hair, using a piece of polished metal as a mirror. It reflects just enough to make you sad. Your hair has taken on a life of its own, rising in sections like it's attempting to flee. You try to smooth it with water. It laughs at you. You find a comb carved from bone. You drag it through once and remove enough debris to start a small fire. You drag it through again and pull out something that moves. You stop brushing. A knock at the door. A visitor. You panic, checking yourself in the reflection again. Your cloak is askew. Your cheeks are flushed. And there's still a streak of child mucus on your shoulder. You do your best to hide it with dignity. The door creaks open, and it's the goose. Again, you slam the door. Your heart is racing. Your sweat has come back with vengeance. You reapply the moss. It's doing less now, like it's given up. You consider asking the old women at the well for something stronger, but last time you brought up your odor, they offered to bury you in mint leaves and say a prayer. You light a bit of dried sage. At least, you think it's sage. It might be hay. You wave the smoke around your armpits. A fly dies in midair. You count that as a win. The midday bell rings in the distance, muffled by the thick air and your growing awareness that you are slowly becoming one with your clothing. You consider bathing, but that would involve convincing someone to heat water, carry it, pour it, and then not report you to the local priest for vanity. You remember what happened last time. You were clean for 5 whole minutes before 3 villagers accused you of witchcraft. One of them pointed at your smooth skin and screamed. You spent the afternoon explaining to a very skeptical monk that soap was not the devil's pudding. Now, you just exist. Not clean, not filthy, just somewhere in the purgatory of human decay. You sit back down, moss in hand, and press it gently against your temples. Not because it helps, but because it's cold and vaguely comforting. You take a deep breath, inhale mildew, and consider your life choices. Someone walks by outside and mutters, "Bless them," in a tone that suggests pity more than prayer. You press the moss to your heart and close your eyes. This is fine. You are adapting. You are, at the very least, no longer the worst-smelling person in a 3-yard radius. Victory. The scythe is handed to you without fanfare, ceremony, or a safety demonstration. It's just thrust into your palms by a man whose beard starts at his eyes and ends somewhere near his collarbone. He says nothing except, "Don't lose a toe," and then walks off in a direction that screams, "Not my problem." You look down at the curved blade, ancient and slightly rusted but still gleaming in places where previous users probably bled on it. It is heavier than expected, and somehow radiates both danger and the vague scent of mildew. You're expected to cut barley, or wheat, or hay. You're not sure, and no one explains. The field stretches out like a cruel joke, golden, endless, and already hot enough to bake regret directly into your spine. Other villagers move in long, sweeping arcs, slicing stalks with practiced rhythm, backs bent in a communal hymn of agricultural despair. You, on the other hand, hold the scythe like it's a haunted violin, and you've never played an instrument before. Your first swing misses the ground entirely and slices through the air with a dramatic whoosh that terrifies a nearby sparrow. The second swing connects, but not with crops. Your sleeve gets caught on the blade, nearly taking your dignity and a chunk of your arm with it. You swear quietly. The wind carries it away to the heavens, where the angels now judge you for your aim and your vocabulary. Eventually, you figure out a technique that involves less flailing and more grim resignation. The key is to accept that you will sweat, suffer, and sunburn all at once. Farming, you quickly learn, is not romantic. It is not gentle. It is not the soft pastel-tinted dream sold to you by curated Instagram accounts with windmills and puppies. It is endless repetition, chafing in unholy places, and the dull ache of existential futility. You cut, you bunch, you repeat. The sun climbs higher, and your skin slowly transitions through every shade of oops. Your cloak is off and tied around your waist, and your tunic now clings to you like a sad, wet napkin. The man next to you wipes his forehead with a handful of straw and tells you a story about a man who once fell asleep mid-harvest and was eaten by ants. You nod and laugh like that's hilarious, and not your likely future. You ask for water. Someone points vaguely toward a barrel a quarter-mile away that smells like warm pennies and has been touched by every person in the village. You drink it anyway because dehydration trumps dignity. It tastes like wood and distant cow. Around noon, you are told to move to another patch of field. The beets await. You don't know much about beets, except that they stain everything and are suspiciously durable. You kneel, cautiously, and begin pulling at the leafy tops. They resist. You pull harder. They still resist. It becomes a standoff. You, the modern human, with the upper body strength of a folding chair, versus root vegetables that have trained under the weight of centuries. You finally manage to yank one free, and the sudden release throws you backward into the dirt. A nearby goat watches with genuine amusement. You try to stand. You trip over another beet. Your ankle rolls in betrayal. You land with a soft thud, face first in the very crop you sought to conquer. The beets have won this round, possibly the war. When you open your eyes, your cheek is smeared with purple-red shame, and your hands look like you committed a crime of passion in a berry patch. You sit up slowly, blinking through the salt of your own sweat. The same goat approaches and licks your elbow. You are too tired to protest. Lunch is called, not by a bell, but by a woman yelling from a distance that the stew is ready, and if anyone wants bread, they'd better hurry before the chickens take it. You limp toward the communal area, dragging your pride behind you like a second cloak. The scythe is abandoned somewhere in the field. You hope no one notices. You are beginning to understand why peasants aged like avocados and had no time for abstract concepts like dreams or leisure. The food is stew, in name only. An earthy broth with root chunks and a floating mystery. It is scalding and slightly gritty, and you devour it like it might heal your ruined body. The bread is hard enough to double as a defensive weapon. You dip it in the stew until it softens, just enough to chew without fear of dental collapse. A woman sits next to you and hands you a raw onion. You look at it, unsure if it's a gift or a challenge. She nods. You bite it. Your mouth becomes a battlefield. Your eyes weep. She pats your back with the affection of someone who knows you will not last long. After lunch, there's more work. There's always more work. This time, it's collecting bundles and stacking them in lopsided piles that threaten to avalanche every time the wind blows. You try to balance a stack on your shoulder like you've seen others do, but your spine immediately files a complaint. You drop the entire bundle. A small child walks by carrying 3 times as much and says nothing, but you feel judged all the same. By late afternoon, your arms feel like boiled rope. Your legs are jelly. Your back is a haunted house of creaks and groans. The sun begins to lower, casting long, judgmental shadows across the field, and someone mercifully calls it a day. You trudge back toward your hut, trailing beet juice, grass stains, and the scent of failure. The goat follows again. You do not fight it. You reach your door, collapse onto the stool outside, and stare at your hands, blistered, dirty, possibly glowing faintly from sun exposure. You thought manual labor would be noble, maybe even meditative, but what it really island is endless, and somehow, tomorrow, it starts all over again. The midday bell isn't a bell at all. It's a man with lungs like a war horn bellowing, stews up, from somewhere behind a stack of wood. It echoes through the village like a prophecy, and suddenly everyone is moving. Not fast, but with the determined shuffle of people who know there is only so much bread to go around before the chickens get clever. You follow the crowd, trailing sweat, beet pulp, and a scent that might now be permanent. The goat from the morning strolls behind you again, uninvited. But at this point, you're starting to think of it as a moral support animal with boundary issues. You arrive at the communal table, which is less a table and more a long, uneven slab of wood balanced on two barrels. People gather around it like medieval stockholders at a crisis meeting. Someone hands you a bowl of stew. You stare into it. It's gray, not beige, not brown, not even taupe. Gray. Emotionally gray, like the inside of a rain cloud that just gave up. It has the viscosity of sadness and the smell of boiled stone. You stir it with the wooden spoon provided, hoping the contents might clarify themselves. They do not. You find a limp root, possibly turnip, and something else that has the texture of sponge but the shape of a regret. A woman across from you eats hers with mechanical precision, not pausing between bites. You take that as a sign that hesitation is for cowards and scoop some into your mouth. It tastes like hot dishwater and sage. Not bad sage, just confused sage, like it wasn't sure it wanted to be here. Someone passes you bread. You catch it mid-air, which you're proud of until it bruises your palm. The loaf is dense, not hearty, not wholesome. Dense. It has weight. It could anchor a ship. You attempt to tear off a piece, but it resists, bending slightly and then returning to its original shape, as if daring you to try again. You eventually gnaw an edge off like a squirrel, your jaw cramping before you've made it halfway through. The flavor is flour, air, and a memory of salt. You dip it in the stew, hoping for a textural reprieve. It softens just enough to become a gelatinous paste that clings to your tongue like a bad dream. You chew anyway, because calories are calories, and dignity was lost sometime around hour 4 of existing in this century. Then comes the pie. No one announces it. It just appears, sliced unevenly and slightly steaming, placed in the middle of the table by a man whose apron reads more like a threat than a garment. The crust is lumpy, cracked in places, and visibly oozing something from its seams. You hesitate, but the child beside you grabs a slice with both hands and chomps down like it's the last food on earth. You take that as your cue and reach for a piece, noting that it doesn't cut so much as fracture. The filling island, unidentifiable. It is brown, with hints of red and a mysterious glisten that feels intentional. You take a bite. It tastes like meat, but also dirt. Not earthy dirt, actual dirt, with hints of rosemary. You chew slowly, trying to decipher the protein. Too stringy for chicken, too gamey for beef, too chewy for anything that lived by choice. You glance at the man who brought it. He winks. You stop chewing for a moment. You resume chewing because fear doesn't cancel hunger. Someone beside you guesses pigeon. Another insists it's badger. A third says, not rat, which feels suspiciously specific. You take another bite because your stomach has started to growl again, and frankly, you don't want to fight the goat for leftovers. Conversation around the table continues as if no one is currently digesting a moral dilemma. People talk about weather, crops, someone's uncle who fell into a ditch and became a cautionary tale. A woman with 3 teeth laughs so hard she slaps the pie, sending a flake of crust sailing into someone's bowl. No one reacts. You quietly push the rest of your pie toward the goat, who sniffs it, sneezes, and walks away. Even the goat has standards. You look down at your bowl. Half the stew remains. You try to psych yourself up. You tell yourself it's soup adjacent, that with enough chewing, anything is edible, that this is what survival looks like. You try another spoonful and discover a tiny bone, which you hide under a leaf so you don't have to think about it. Across the table, a man dips his bread in ale and calls it a medieval sandwich. You copy him. It's slightly better. The ale is warm and tastes like regret and barley, but it dulls the sharp corners of the bread and numbs the existential despair. Someone offers you cheese. You accept before realizing it's green on purpose. Apparently it's aged, or cursed, possibly both. A chicken hops onto the table and steals a turnip from someone's bowl. No one stops it. You assume it has earned the right. You finish what you can, wiping your mouth with your sleeve like everyone else. You're not sure you're full, but you're definitely no longer hungry. Your stomach feels weighted, not satisfied, just aware. Aware that something new has entered the ecosystem of your body and that negotiations are now underway. You stand up slowly. You've survived lunch. Barely. You walk back toward the field, uncertain if you're more tired or more confused. The air feels heavier. The goat is waiting for you, because of course at Island. It follows at your heel, probably hoping for more pie. You look down at it. Never again, you mutter. The goat sneezes in agreement. The afternoon slump hits the village like a fog. Work pauses, sweat dries, and everyone begins to look around for something, anything, to distract themselves from the fact that they've been alive for too many hours without the promise of entertainment, beyond aching backs and bread that could double as masonry. You expect them to rest, maybe nap, but instead the villagers turn toward spectacle, as if boredom itself is a demon that must be exorcised by nonsense. It begins with the children. They appear from nowhere, as though conjured by hunger and chaos, each carrying a turnip like a weapon. At first, it looks like they're sharing food. Then one hurls his vegetable directly into the chest of another child, who collapses instantly, gasping, clutching his stomach as though mortally wounded. The crowd erupts in laughter, not concern. Within seconds, the entire group is pelting each other, turnips flying like hailstones, smacking against tunics and bare legs with dull, meaty thuds. One girl throws hers high, and it arcs through the air before striking an unsuspecting chicken, who squawks in outrage and joins the battle with feathers and fury. The games escalate. Children fall to the ground in dramatic deaths, limbs sprawled, tongues hanging out, until they remember they're still alive and leap back up for the next round. You watch in horror as one small boy takes a turnip directly to the face, pauses, wobbles, then collapses into the mud like a Shakespearean hero gasping out his final line. The crowd applauds. He pops back up, grinning with 2 teeth missing, and demands another turnip. You turn away, seeking adult company, hoping for something with dignity. Instead, you find 3 men in the center of the square stripping off their cloaks and circling each other like wolves. Someone whispers, "Cheese," and suddenly the mood shifts. A wheel of cheese, hard, cracked, and probably older than you, sits on a wooden stool, the prize. The crowd forms a circle. The men lunge. It is not wrestling as you know it. It is grappling, groaning, slapping, biting, and occasionally headbutting. At one point, one man simply sits on another until he wheezes out defeat. Another scoops his opponent up and drops him in a pile of hay. No referees, no rules, only the cheese. The crowd chants encouragement in time with the struggle, stomping their wooden clogs in rhythm until dust rises in choking clouds. The victor finally emerges, face flushed, arms raised, holding the cheese aloft like a holy relic. He bites into it immediately, teeth sinking into something so hard it might break them, and the crowd cheers as if he's slain a dragon. You think it can't get stranger. You think maybe now it's time for music or dancing or a story around the fire. But then a man, older, wiry, with a mischievous grin, climbs onto the stool that once bore the cheese and raises his hand for silence. He announces, in the tone of someone declaring war, that it is time for the farting contest. No one laughs. No one scoffs. Everyone nods with grave respect, like he has suggested a ceremony of spiritual importance. People shuffle forward, forming a semicircle. Competitors step up. They are serious, focused, ready. The rules, such as they are shouted by the announcer, though everyone seems to know them already. Volume is praised. duration admired. Tone and musicality earn the loudest applause. The first man squats, face intense with concentration, and delivers a short burst that sounds like a boot scraping mud. Modest applause. The second produces a longer note, higher pitched, almost melodic. Roars of approval. Someone throws a cabbage leaf in tribute. You stand frozen, unsure if you've fallen into a nightmare or an avant-garde performance. A woman beside you nudges your arm and says, "Good season for it, eh?" As if gas contests are as natural as rainfall. The competitors grow bolder. One man lifts his tunic slightly, as though presenting an instrument, and lets out a sound that rattles against the wooden stool. The crowd explodes with laughter and cheers. Another manages 2 quick bursts in succession, and someone yells, "Encore!" You don't know where to look. You don't know who you are anymore. The final competitor, a thin man with a face like dried leather, steps forward. The crowd hushes. This is clearly a champion. He squats low, grips his knees, and closes his eyes. Silence builds, tension grows. Even the chickens pause, heads cocked. Then, an eruption. Long, steady, unbroken, echoing across the square like a trumpet announcing doom. It goes on, and on, and on. Children gasp. Women cover their mouths. Men raise their fists in admiration. When it finally ends, there is silence, then thunderous applause. The champion bows. Someone crowns him with a wreath of onion stalks. You stare, wide-eyed, jaw slack, as the village celebrates this moment with more enthusiasm than you have ever seen for any achievement, anywhere, at any time. You wonder if you've lost your mind or if perhaps history itself has been lying to you all along. These people do not read poetry in the square. They do not debate philosophy. They celebrate digestive acoustics. As the sun dips lower, the crowd begins to disperse, satisfied. Children return to their turnips, men return to their ale, women gossip with renewed vigor, and the farting champion walks proudly through the square, onion crown tilted just so, greeted with nods of admiration. You sit on the edge of the bench, dizzy from dust and disbelief, wondering how Netflix has not yet invented a category for this exact genre. You rest your head in your hands, silently, hoping tomorrow will bring something more comprehensible. Somewhere behind you, another turnip flies through the air and smacks into the wall. The village roars with laughter. You know, with aching clarity, that this is your life now. The church is smaller than you imagined. Though calling it a church might be generous, it's a squat stone building leaning slightly to one side as if exhausted from centuries of standing. The roof sags, patched with thatch and desperation, and the bell in the tower is less of a bell and more of a lump of metal that clunks politely when struck. You follow the villagers inside, shuffling along the uneven floorboards, the air heavy with damp stone, candle smoke, and a faint whiff of goat that has apparently become a regular parishioner. The pews are benches, hard and crooked, forcing you to sit at an angle that feels both penitential and orthopedically hostile. You wedge yourself between 2 women who both smell strongly of onions and judgment, and you try to fold your legs neatly, though your wooden clogs refuse to cooperate and thump against the boards like distant drums. You bow your head in imitation, trying to blend in, though you already know the sheep grazing outside the open doorway will see right through you. The priest arrives at the front, shuffling down the aisle with a slow dignity that dissolves the moment you notice his feet. His shoes do not match. One is a leather boot, scuffed, cracked, and held together by sheer willpower. The other is a worn felt slipper, bright red, embroidered with something that might once have been a flower. They are not even close to the same size. The congregation does not react. You glance around in disbelief, but everyone is already kneeling as though this is normal. The priest clears his throat, coughs once, and begins. His sermon starts confidently. Something about faith, the harvest, and keeping your soul free of sin, though you suspect even he isn't listening to himself. He flips through his book, squinting, then closes it abruptly with the resigned air of someone who forgot his lines. He improvises. "Trust," he announces. "Trust is what matters." He pauses, waiting for agreement. The crowd murmurs dutifully. He gestures vaguely to the rafters. "You must trust the Lord. You must trust your neighbor. You must trust the roof will not collapse, even though it looks like it might at any moment." The congregation nods gravely, as if this has always been scripture. He shuffles his feet as he speaks, and the mismatched shoes squeak against the stone floor in disharmony. The red slipper slips slightly, dangling from his toes, while the boot stomps down with authority. He continues preaching about trust. Trust in the land, trust in livestock, trust in stew not poisoning you if boiled long enough. You try not to laugh. You bite your lip. Your shoulders shake. The sheep at the doorway stares at you. Its eyes narrow. It knows. The priest raises his arms for emphasis, and the slipper finally gives up, sliding off and skidding across the floor. A small boy retrieves it reverently, holding it like a relic, before handing it back. The priest nods solemnly, slips it back on without breaking rhythm, and declares, "Even when life does not match, we trust that God still walks with us." The crowd murmurs approval. You cover your mouth to hide the sound that escapes your throat, which is definitely not reverence. The sermon meanders. He compares trust to bread, which makes sense for 2 sentences before veering into a warning about goats in the garden. He warns against vanity while smoothing down his hair. He tells a story about a saint who apparently once fought a storm with only a ladle. You're fairly sure he's making it all up, but the congregation eats it up like it's holy scripture, nodding, sighing, and whispering "Amen" at intervals. You focus on the floor to keep from laughing, studying the cracks in the stone, the melted wax trails, the muddy footprint that is definitely human but suspiciously small. You glance up once, accidentally, and catch the priest's eyes. He squints at you. You panic, nod vigorously, and murmur, "Yes, trust," like you've been caught cheating on an exam. He nods back, reassured, and continues. Outside, the sheep bleats loudly, perfectly timed with one of his pauses. The congregation chuckles as though the animal has added commentary. You look at the sheep. The sheep looks at you. It knows you are not laughing for the same reason. The service ends with a hymn, though hymn might be ambitious. It is more a collection of voices attempting the same tune and failing gloriously. The priest claps along in uneven time, one boot stomping, one slipper squeaking, a rhythm that could not be replicated by any known instrument. You try to join in but can't find the notes, your voice sticking out like a crow among doves. The woman beside you pats your arm, perhaps in pity, perhaps in threat. Finally, it is over. The priest blesses everyone with a wave of his mismatched shoes and declares the day holy. The villagers shuffle out, chatting cheerfully, already gossiping about who sat where and who sang too loudly. You follow, still holding in the laughter that threatens to explode out of you. The sheep is waiting at the door. It bleats again, softly this time, almost like it's mocking you. You glance back at the priest, slipper dangling once more, and nearly lose it. You cough instead, pretending to clear your throat. But deep down, you know the truth. The sheep noticed. The well is the center of everything. It is not just where water is drawn. It is where time stops, where voices sharpen, and where lives are dissected like chickens on a chopping block. By mid-afternoon, the old women are there, posted like guards of a realm that exists entirely in whispers and knowing looks. They do not move quickly, but their eyes track everything. Their buckets rest at their feet, forgotten, because the water is incidental. The real business is gossip, and business is thriving. You approach cautiously, bucket in hand, because you do, technically, need water. But as soon as you step within earshot, you realize you are trespassing on sacred ground. One woman, her back bent like a question mark, is speaking with the precision of a surgeon and the relish of a playwright. "I saw him," she declares, her eyes flashing, "outside the barn at dawn, and not with his wife." Gasps ripple through the circle. Another clutches her chest dramatically, the string of onions around her neck swaying like holy beads. "With who?" she demands. The first woman pauses, savoring the moment, then leans in. "With the Cooper's goat." The circle erupts. Not in shock, not in horror. Those would be reasonable. No, they erupt in delight, in the pure joy of a story that can roll downhill and grow bigger with every telling. You freeze, bucket in hand, wishing desperately to disappear into the cobblestones. The woman beside you, sharp-eyed and sharp-tongued, notices your hesitation and smiles. "Oh, you didn't know? The goat's prettier than his wife." The others cackle, toothless and merciless. The next victim is the baker's wife. Her crime, wearing yellow. "Too bold," declares one, as if passing sentence. "Too young for her years." Another shakes her head, tisking, and she sings while kneading bread. Too much joy in it. Suspicious. They all nod sagely, as if happiness itself is grounds for excommunication. You make the mistake of smiling at the thought of bread being kneaded to a tune. Instantly, 3 pairs of eyes snap to you. You look down at your shoes, which suddenly seem far too loud in their clunky wooden misery. They shift targets again, slicing through the village population like knives through butter. The blacksmith is too angry, the miller's daughter too quiet, the priest too forgetful, his shoes still a subject of debate. "Did you see the slipper?" one woman whispers, and the entire circle nods, solemn as mourners. You shuffle your bucket closer, trying to pretend you're invisible, but invisibility does not exist here. They turn to affairs. Affairs between men and women, women and men and goats, goats, and the idea of freedom. One woman insists she saw the innkeeper's boy sneaking out of the hayloft with someone. Another insists it was no one at all, just a shadow. But the implication alone is enough to ignite fresh scandal. The hay itself is now suspect. You lean against the well wall, trying to look casual, but casualness is impossible under their scrutiny. The knitting woman narrows her eyes. Her needles click faster. "And what about this one?" she says, nodding in your direction. Always listening, always lingering, too quiet. The others turn as one, heads swiveling, eyes narrowing, their attention slicing into you with surgical precision. You stammer something about needing water. They exchange looks. One leans closer. "Is that all you need?" she asks, voice dripping with implication. Another adds, "Too clean, that tunic. Who washed it? Who touched it?" They all chuckle knowingly, as if your laundry has committed a sin. You grip your bucket tighter, wishing it could swallow you whole. The knitting needles click like a clock, counting down to your execution. One woman tilts her head, studying you as if you were a puzzle piece jammed into the wrong place. "Strange accent," she mutters. "Strange walk," another nods. "And always with that goat." The group hums in agreement. You look around wildly, but the goat is nowhere in sight, probably off ruining your reputation by existing in proximity to you. The whispers grow louder. "Not from here," one says. "Not really working. Saw them staring at the priest's shoes." Another chimes in, mocking them maybe. The circle leans closer. You are being devoured by suspicion, one syllable at a time. You try to defend yourself. You open your mouth to say something, anything, that will exonerate you, but all that comes out is a strangled laugh. The women pounce on it instantly. "Laughing at us," one cries. "Hiding something," shouts another. The group murmurs, nodding, clucking their tongues like chickens circling fresh feed. The air around you thickens with judgment. Finally, the oldest woman, her face so wrinkled it looks carved from wood, delivers the verdict. New scandal, she says, pointing directly at you with a bony finger. This one. The circle nods in perfect unison. The matter is settled. You, apparently, are now a story. The rest of the village will hear about it before sunset. By nightfall, someone will insist they saw you creeping around the granary. By morning, there will be debates about your tunic, your clogs, your suspiciously soft hands. By the end of the week, you will be linked to the goat. You lower your bucket into the well, too defeated to argue, too tired to resist. The rope creaks, the water splashes, and you pull up the heavy load with shaking arms. When you turn to leave, the women are already whispering behind you, their voices like smoke wrapping around your ears. You glance back once. They are smiling, not kindly, not cruelly, but with the satisfaction of craftsmen who have honed their art to perfection. You carry your bucket home slowly, heavy with water, heavier with the knowledge that you've just become a headline in the only newspaper this village has. And somewhere, the goat is laughing. The sound reaches you before the man does. A twangy, nasal hum, drifting over the fields like an omen of mild inconvenience. You're bent over a pile of hay, trying to untangle your tunic from a thorn bush, when the first line cuts through the air. In the year of our Lord. Your shoulders tense. You don't know what follows, but you know it won't be brief. The bard appears in the lane, lute slung proudly, cloak frayed at the edges, beard patchy in the way that suggests effort without results. He is smiling, though it's the smile of someone who has no idea how unwelcome he already island. He strums again, louder this time, the lute slightly out of tune but confident, like a man who thinks enthusiasm is the same as talent. In the year of our Lord, he begins again, and the villagers turn toward him, some curious, some resigned. You, unfortunately, are too close to walk away. The song that follows is about a knight who did something vaguely brave involving a dragon, or maybe just a very large lizard. The details are inconsistent, but the refrain, "In the year of our Lord," arrives with punishing regularity. The bard sings with the solemn intensity of a man who believes he is shaping history, though his voice cracks on every high note and drags every low one into a whimper. When he finishes, the villagers clap politely, the way you clap when someone has just tripped but insists they meant to. He does not leave. Instead, he launches into a second song. Same introduction, "In the year of our Lord." This one is about a harvest festival where someone may or may not have won a pig. The pig, you notice, is the most interesting character, and even then, the pig's story ends abruptly when the bard forgets the verse and fills the gap with loud strumming until he remembers the refrain again. The villagers clap, less politely this time. By the time he begins the third song, also introduced with the exact same line, you have stopped pretending to enjoy yourself. This one involves a maiden who might be cursed or just boring, depending on how charitably you interpret the lyrics. He sings it twice, just to be sure no one missed the maiden's lack of personality. You stare at the ground, imagining crime. The bard smiles, bows, and sits on a stool someone kindly drags out for him. You think he will rest. You think you are safe. You are not safe. He begins again. Song 1, from the top. By the next morning, he is still here. You wake to the sound of "In the year of our Lord," drifting through your window like a mosquito you cannot swat. The goose stands outside, glaring at the bard, as though it, too, is offended by his persistence. You find yourself nodding in solidarity with the goose. At the well, the old women discuss him with the precision of generals. He plays too loud, one says, narrowing her eyes. And his beard is uneven, adds another, like this is a moral failing. The knitting woman declares, he will drink all the ale and remember none of the faces. They cackle, but no one suggests sending him away. This, you realize, is your burden to bear. Day 2 drags on. He repeats the night song 5 times. Each rendition adds nothing, except maybe a longer pause before the refrain, as though suspense might transform mediocrity into art. Children run around him, mocking the verses, turning "In the Year of Our Lord" into playground chants. One child invents a dance that involves flapping arms and falling over dramatically, which is arguably better entertainment than the bard himself. By evening, you find yourself praying, not to God exactly, just praying in general, for silence, for an accident, for the lute strings to snap. Anything. Day 3 dawns. You are brittle, hollow-eyed, a shell of your former self. The bard stands in the square, strumming the same opening chords. Even the cows in the field moo with irritation. You notice the goose again, positioned directly in front of him, staring with murderous patience. The bard sings on, oblivious. The goose lowers its head. You know what's coming. The final verse of the night's song is interrupted by a sudden honk, deafening, primal, and filled with vengeance. The goose charges, wings spread, beak open, flapping directly at the bard's knees. The lute screeches as his strumming falters. He stumbles backward, barely keeping balance, while the goose nips at his ankles with relentless fury. The villagers laugh harder than they have in weeks. Some clap. One man calls it divine justice. The bard insists he meant to stop, bowing awkwardly, but his voice trembles, and he packs up his lute with the urgency of a man who has just glimpsed death in feathered form. By evening, he is gone, disappearing down the road, muttering about ungrateful peasants and violent poultry. The village exhales in relief. The goose stands tall, victorious, its feathers ruffled but proud. You watch it strut away, and for the first time, you feel true gratitude for its existence. That night, the silence is so profound you nearly weep. You lie in your straw bed, listening to the absence of "In the Year of Our Lord," and you realize the goose has saved you all. For once, the village has a new hero, and it isn't the night. The cobbler's shop is small, wedged between a pigsty and a shed that appears to lean on it for balance. The air inside is thick with leather, glue, and the faint, sour tang of feet that haven't been washed since the last crusade. Shoes in various stages of decay line the walls, some sturdy, some collapsed in on themselves, all of them looking like survivors of wars no one recorded. You step inside, hopeful, because your wooden clogs have already rubbed your heels raw and you're starting to walk like a man who's hiding knives in his boots. You need new shoes, desperately. The cobbler, however, is not working. He is not even pretending to work. He is asleep, stretched out flat under his workbench, mouth open, snoring loudly enough to rattle the tools hanging above him. His hands are folded over his stomach, and every now and then he smacks his lips like he's eating something in his dreams. Judging by the rhythm, you suspect it's pie. You clear your throat. Nothing. You tap on the bench. Nothing. You say, timidly, "Excuse me?" And his snore answers with a long, rising whistle that ends in a satisfied sigh. He rolls over, clutching a piece of leather like it's a pillow. The apprentice appears from the back room, lanky and sullen, with a mop of hair falling over his eyes. He leans against the doorway and sighs, long and theatrical, the kind of sigh only perfected by teenagers across centuries. It is the sigh of someone trapped in an endless loop of responsibility and boredom. "He won't wake up," the boy says, voice flat. You glance down at the cobbler again. He does, in fact, look unshakable. One shoe dangles precariously from a shelf above him, threatening to fall with each snore, but otherwise, he is immovable. You shift your weight and gesture helplessly at your feet. "I need shoes," you whisper. Like it's a confession. The apprentice shrugs. He needs sleep. You want to argue that you need arch support more than the cobbler needs dreams of pastry, but the boy's tone is absolute. You look again at the cobbler's blissful face. He lets out a little chuckle mid-snore. "Definitely pie." The apprentice walks over, picks up a half-finished shoe from the bench, and tosses it back down. He says shoes take the shape of the soul. The boy mutters. But really, he just doesn't like making them. Another sigh, a long one. You feel it in your bones. You lower yourself onto a stool. The wood creaks ominously. Your clogs dig into your arches like vengeful bricks. The apprentice slouches beside you, staring into the distance like he's narrating his own tragedy. Everyone thinks cobblers are important, he says, but half the time people just wrap their feet in rags and hope they don't die of blisters. Sometimes, he pauses, gazing at his master under the bench. I think he's got the right idea. The cobbler snores louder, as if agreeing. You try to imagine life without proper shoes, and then realize you're already living it. Each step you've taken has been a small act of violence committed against your body. Your toes are bruised, your heels blistered, and you're convinced one toenail is about to give up completely. You look at the rows of shoes on the shelves, mismatched, cracked, some stuffed with straw, and feel a pang of longing for modern sneakers, for memory foam, for the sweet embrace of rubber soles that don't double as torture devices. The apprentice picks up your clog, turning it over in his hands. He frowns. Wood, he says, like it's an insult. No wonder you walk like a dying donkey. He tosses it back to you with all the care of a boy throwing stones into a pond. You stare at him. Can't you make shoes? Another sigh. This one could extinguish candles. I could. But if I start, then I'll never stop. One day I'm fixing your clogs, the next I'm sewing boots for every fool who comes through the door. And then what? I'm him. He gestures at the cobbler, who is now drooling onto a piece of leather shaped vaguely like a sandal. The cobbler twitches, mutters something about apples, and shifts onto his side. The boy shakes his head. See? He dreams. I get to sweep. This is my life. You sit there in silence, the room filled only with snores and sighs, like some strange duet of resignation. A chicken pokes its head in through the open doorway, clucks once, then retreats, apparently unimpressed with your collective lack of productivity. Finally, you stand, your joints popping in protest. The apprentice raises an eyebrow, waiting to see if you'll complain. You don't. Instead, you mutter something about coming back tomorrow, though you already know the cobbler will probably still be under that bench, dreaming of pies, shoes unfinished. The boy shrugs in farewell, sinking further into his teenage despair. Outside, the sun beats down. The dust clings to your sweaty tunic. You put your clogs back on. Each step a small tragedy, each click of wood on stone, a reminder that you are one blister away from walking on your knees. Behind you, the cobbler snores again, loud enough to carry into the street. You sigh now too, though it's not as dramatic as the apprentice's. It's quieter, a sigh of a person who knows they will be limping for the foreseeable future. You trudge back toward the square, clogs clacking, every step echoing the cruel laughter of modern arch support left centuries away. The goat falls into step beside you, eyeing your feet. You swear it smirks. Brother Cuthbert lives at the edge of the village in a stone hut that looks less like a dwelling and more like the sort of place a fairy tale witch might store spare curses. The roof is sagging under moss, the doorway draped with herbs drying in bundles, and the air outside smells of beeswax, smoke, and something faintly metallic, like old coins. The villagers speak of him in half whispers, never directly, always with a glance toward the trees, as though the trees themselves might tell on them. You're sent to him under the pretense of needing medicine, though everyone knows it's also an excuse to keep him occupied, so he doesn't wander back into town and start shouting about visions again. You step across the uneven threshold and find him exactly where rumor places him, cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by wood shavings, carving spoons with the reverence of a priest handling relics. His beard is long, patchy, and tangled, his robe patched with clumsy stitches, his eyes watery yet piercing. He does not look up when you enter. "Another one come to mock me?" he mutters, chipping at a block of wood with a small knife. His voice is thin, brittle, like old parchment. He pauses, tilts his head toward the rafters, and whispers, Hush now. Don't frighten them. You follow his gaze and realize he is speaking not to you, but to the ceiling beams. You clear your throat and explain, haltingly, that you were sent for something useful. Maybe a salve, maybe advice about blisters, maybe simply to keep him busy. He raises one hand, silencing you, and lifts a freshly finished spoon from the pile. It is smooth, pale, delicately carved, except the handle is a face. Not a cheerful face, not even a solemn face, but a face caught somewhere between disapproval and accusation. Its eyes are too large, its mouth a thin line. He holds it toward you. This one sees, he says gravely, into your soul. You blink. You look at the spoon. You look back at him. He nods, absolutely certain. Go on, he says. Hold it. You reach out reluctantly, and the wood is warm from his hands. You stare at the face carved into it, and though you know it is only wood, you swear the eyes follow you, narrowing slightly when you shift your grip. The monk leans in close enough that you can smell onions on his breath. It judges you. You laugh nervously, but stop when the spoon's shadow on the wall seems larger than it should be. Brother Cuthbert sits back, satisfied, and pulls another half-carved lump from his pile. He works quickly, almost feverishly, muttering under his breath, as though he and the wood are having an argument. The words are half prayer, half threat. You catch fragments. Not crooked, not today. The Lord watches spoons most of all. The hut is cluttered with dozens of them. Some rest on shelves, some dangle from strings, some are stuck in the dirt floor like markers over tiny graves. Each one has a face, not cheerful, not whimsical. Faces that seem to know too much. Some grimace, some smirk, some glare at you with a disdain that feels uncomfortably personal. You ask cautiously if he carves anything else. Bowls, maybe, or crosses. He shakes his head violently. Only spoons. A bowl swallows, but a spoon delivers. Think on that. You do not want to think on that. He stands suddenly, shuffling toward the door, beckoning you with the urgency of a man who has just remembered something crucial. You follow him outside into the shade of the trees, where he places a hand on the bark of an old oak and whispers something in Latin, or at least something that sounds like Latin filtered through madness. He nods as if the tree has answered. They tell me things, he says. Warnings, secrets, recipes. You nod politely, because disagreeing with a man who carves judgmental cutlery and converses with trees feels unsafe. He presses a spoon into your hand, this one with a crooked grin carved into the handle. This one laughs at lies, he explains. Don't carry it if you plan to deceive. You mutter that you'll keep that in mind. As you turn to leave, you glance back at the doorway of his hut, where the pile of spoons seems to have shifted. Dozens of tiny wooden faces glint in the light, each angled just enough that they appear to be staring straight at you. You walk faster. Back in the village, people ask if Brother Cuthbert behaved. You hesitate, clutching the spoon in your hand, feeling its wooden smile press into your palm. He gave me this, you say. The women at the well peer at it, mutter, and cross themselves. One suggests you throw it in the river. Another warns that it will just float back. That night, you set the spoon on the table beside your straw bed. The carved eyes catch the candlelight, flickering like they're blinking. You roll over, determined not to look, but you feel its presence, watching, waiting. You tell yourself it's just wood, just a spoon, and yet you dream of faces carved into trees, whispering about sins you haven't committed yet. The river is alive before you even reach it, the air ringing with slaps, splashes, and voices sharpened to knives. The women gather there like warriors, their sleeves rolled, their hair tied back, their eyes glittering with the anticipation of battle. In their hands are tunics, cloaks, linens, all beaten mercilessly against flat stones until dirt flees in terror. You arrive timidly with your single tunic, damp from too much sweat and too little dignity, clutching it to your chest as though it might protect you. At first glance, laundry seems simple. You dip, you scrub, you rinse, you hang. But here it is more than cleanliness. It is theater, competition, and trial by combat. The women strike their garments against the stones with such ferocity that the air booms, each crack like thunder. Every slap is punctuated by a story, and every story cuts deeper than the water is wide. You hover at the edge, unsure whether you're allowed to join or merely to witness. One woman, her arms thick as tree trunks, pounds a cloak until the spray soaks her face. She does not notice. She is too busy describing how the miller's wife looked at the cooper's son last market day, a look so scandalous it could curdle milk. Another woman dunks a stained tunic into the river and announces that the priest has been forgetting his prayers again, possibly distracted by his own slipper. Laughter bursts forth like water over a dam, sharp and unkind. You try to imitate their movements. You place your tunic on the stone, pour a little water over it, and slap it gently. The sound is pitiful, like a fish gasping on shore. The women pause, turn their heads in unison, and stare at you. Their arms freeze mid-swing. You flush hot, sweat breaking out along your temples. First time, one mutters, her lips curling into a smirk. The others return to work, but their smothered giggles ripple louder than the river. Determined, you try again, this time swinging with all your might. The wet cloth smacks against the stone, splashing water directly into your face. The women howl, not unkindly, but with the raw amusement of spectators watching a clown stumble in the mud. You wipe your eyes with the edge of your sleeve, which is somehow wetter than your face. The stories continue, merciless as the beating of cloth. The baker's bread was burned again, proof that his wife spends too much time in yellow and not enough time supervising ovens. The blacksmith, someone insists, talks to his anvil when he thinks no one is listening. Another says she saw the innkeeper's boy kissing not one, but two girls behind the haystacks, which explains why the hay now looks so smug. Every confession, every rumor, is scrubbed into the fabric, wrung out, and left dripping in the river's current. You try to keep up, nodding at the right moments, though you quickly realize the nodding only invites questions. And what do you think? One woman demands suddenly, slapping a shirt so hard water sprays across your face. You stammer, your mind blank, your mouth opening to produce nothing useful. See? Silent, she declares, turning back to the others. Silent ones always know the most. Now they all glance at you with fresh suspicion, as though you are hiding entire affairs in your tunic pocket. You bend lower over your garment, scrubbing until your knuckles ache, trying to appear too busy for scandal. But fate does not let you escape. A sudden current tugs your tunic from your hands. You grab for it, but your fingers slip, and in an instant it is floating downriver, bobbing like a smug little raft. The women stop their pounding. They watch. They laugh. It is not cruel laughter, but it is not gentle either. It is the laughter of people who have seen many fools before and will see many more. One claps her hands, another points as the tunic twirls away, caught on a branch before slipping free again. You stumble into the shallows, shoes squelching, water soaking your legs. You reach for it desperately, but each time you lunge, the river pulls it farther. Your clogs, already traitors, fill with water until they drag you down like anchors. Finally, you collapse back on the bank, soaked to the knees, your hair plastered against your face. The women's laughter rings above you, loud and merciless, echoing against the stones. One wipes her eyes, gasping for breath. "Did you see them chase it?" she cackles, like a child after a goose. Another shakes her head. "That tunic's cleaner now than it's ever been." You sit there dripping, watching as your only decent garment vanishes downstream, carried toward some distant bend. The women return to their pounding, their gossip, their rhythm, but every few moments you hear another chuckle, another reminder that you have become part of the day's entertainment. You know by evening the story will spread. How you lost your tunic to the river, how you splashed like a dog, how the women laughed until their arms ached. You wring water from your shoes, each squeeze releasing another stream of humiliation. You tell yourself you will retrieve the tunic later, perhaps when no one is watching, though you know it is already gone. You sit in the mud, water dripping from your sleeves, listening to the thud of cloth against stone, the river carrying secrets and your dignity alike. When you finally rise, your clothes heavy, your shoes squelching with each step, you realize the women are still talking, not about the miller's wife, not about the priest, not even about the baker's bread. They are talking about you, and they are smiling. The beet fields are heavy with dust, and the thick, sweet smell of earth that clings to everything, from your hair to the inside of your teeth. You've been sent here under the pretense of helping, though helping seems to mean mostly watching other people bend their backs while you attempt not to fall into the furrows. It's here, in the middle of rows upon rows of stubborn roots, that you witness what passes for romance in this century. Two teenagers are working side by side, though working might be generous. They bend, they pull, they blush. They glance at each other like every stolen look is a secret, though it is glaringly obvious to everyone within a 3-mile radius. The girl pulls a turnip with both hands, holding it up like a trophy, and says, "This one is strong like you." The boy, ears turning red, responds by pretending to study a beat that clearly does not need that much attention. You realize with slow horror that you are watching history's most awkward courtship unfold in real time. The girl tosses the turnip into a basket and smooths her hair with dirt-streaked fingers. "My father says turnips grow better if you talk to them," she says, sneaking a look at the boy. "Do you talk to yours?" The boy finally pulls a beet free, grunting as though it weighed as much as a goat, then holds it up. "I don't talk to them," he says, fumbling for confidence, "but I think of you when I pull them." His face immediately flames red, as though his own words have set him on fire. He drops the beet into the basket so hard it bounces out, landing in the dirt with a dull thud. You clutch your stomach, not from laughter but from the second-hand embarrassment that hits harder than any medieval illness. Romance, it turns out, is less candlelit poetry and more sweating in the dirt while comparing root vegetables to each other's personalities. The girl bends again, pretending to focus, but she's smiling now, a shy curve of her lips that she hides behind her hair. "You're clumsy," she says softly, "but maybe that makes the beets grow straighter." The boy beams, as though she has just compared him to a saint instead of an agricultural mishap. They continue, trading roots and glances, speaking in half-sentences that all circle back to the same theme. "You are like this vegetable. I am like that vegetable. And somehow we are both growing in the same soil." It is ridiculous. It is tender. It is happening whether you want to watch it or not. You shift uncomfortably, crouching by your own row, tugging at a beat that refuses to budge. You try to focus, but their voices carry across the field, every whispered word clear, every giggle sharp. You are not part of their moment, yet you are trapped in it, an unwilling third wheel in the slow-motion birth of a romance built on mud. The boy offers the girl a beet shaped like a heart, though the heart is lopsided and looks suspiciously like a kidney. She gasps as though it's a jewel. He presses it into her hands with all the seriousness of a knight bestowing a relic. She clutches it, cheeks pink, and whispers, "I'll keep it." You nearly choke on your own breath. The sun beats down, the air thick with sweat and pollen, and the rest of the workers pretend not to notice. They are kind enough, perhaps, to allow these two their clumsy theater. You are not so lucky. Every gesture feels magnified in your vision, every blush with a signal flare. You yank at your beat harder, out of spite, and nearly fall backward when it finally gives way, leaving you sprawled in the dirt while the teenagers share a smile that feels sharper than judgment. The girl laughs, not at you but near enough to sting. "See?" she says to the boy. Even the beats resist outsiders. The boy nods sagely, though he sneaks another glance at you, his face torn between apology and triumph. By late afternoon, the baskets are piled high, the beats stacked like trophies of endurance. The boy wipes his brow with his sleeve, streaking his face with dirt, and says, "One day I'll have land of my own, rows of turnips, fat as oxen. You could help me tend them." It is not poetry. It is not music. But the way she looks at him, you know it is enough. You stand there, dirt on your knees, beet juice on your hands, wondering if love has ever truly changed, or if it has always been this. Two young people, nervous and hopeful, fumbling in the fields, seeing eternity in the shape of a crooked vegetable. As you trudge back toward the village with your own meager basket, you realize you've been drafted unwillingly into the chorus of their love story. Tomorrow, the women at the well will whisper about how you were in the field, watching, listening, caught in the orbit of two teenagers who found romance in mud. You will become a footnote, the awkward third presence in their saga of turnips and blushing. You sigh, your shoes squelching with river water still trapped from laundry day, and glance at the crooked beet in your hand. It stares back, heart-shaped and mocking. You toss it aside, but the image remains. You are third-wheeling in history. And the worst part? It's almost sweet. The Reeve strides through the village like a man convinced he's holding the kingdom together with the sheer force of his frown. His cloak flaps dramatically, though it's more from the breeze than any inner authority, and his boots scuff the dirt in a rhythm that says, "I am important. Pay attention." Behind him, he drags a little leather-bound notebook, tucked under his arm like a weapon of bureaucracy, though when he pulls it out, you notice the pages are blank. His quill, tucked jauntily into his belt, is dry enough to crumble if touched. Still, the seriousness on his face could stop cows in their tracks. You first encounter him at a fence. The fence, to be precise, is not much of one. It leans at an angle that suggests it has given up on its life's purpose, the slats gaping wide enough for sheep to pass through without even crouching. The Reeve inspects it with the grave attention of a surgeon examining a patient. He strokes his chin, walks 3 paces left, squints, then walks 3 paces right. He taps the wood once with the back of his hand and nods sagely. "Yes," he mutters, loud enough for bystanders to hear. "A fence indeed." Then he scribbles nothing into his blank notebook. The farmer whose land it is looks on, hopeful, perhaps expecting the Reeve to fetch tools, summon help, or at the very least shove a stick into the ground. Instead, the Reeve sighs, closes the book, and proclaims, "I shall return to review this again tomorrow." The farmer stares, mouth half open, but says nothing. The Reeve has already moved on, cloak fluttering, as if the wind itself respects his mission. You trail after him, partly because you have nothing better to do, partly because the absurdity has magnetized you. He visits the pigsty next. The sty gate hangs by one hinge, squeaking each time a pig nudges it. The Reeve leans in, nose wrinkling, and announces, "These pigs require stricter boundaries." The pigs grunt as though mocking him. He writes nothing, but flips through his blank pages as if confirming a previous report. The farmer beside you asks timidly if repairs will be ordered. The Reeve waves a hand, majestic and vague. "All in due course," he says, turning on his heel, the pigs snorting at his retreating back. By midday, you've followed him to 3 more fences, a broken cart, and a well that smells suspiciously of cabbage. At each stop, his method is the same. Inspect with intensity, declare something self-evident, pretend to write, then move on without lifting a finger. His notebook remains as blank as the sky after a storm, but he guards it with the devotion of a saint holding relics. When a child asks him what he's writing, he snaps the book shut so fast the boy jumps, then declares, "Village business," in a tone that brooks no follow-up. You start to wonder if perhaps the job is not to fix anything, but to look serious while acknowledging that things are broken. It is, in its way, a performance, a play staged for the villagers, who all nod solemnly at his pronouncements, while simultaneously muttering curses under their breath once he passes. You begin to admire the artistry. To maintain such a reputation with so little actual work requires skill of a sort. At one point, the reeve stops beside a low wall where a goat is standing proudly on top. He points at it dramatically and shouts, "That should not be there." The goat stares back, unmoved. He fumbles for his quill, pretends to jot something down, then closes the book with finality. "I'll make a note," he says, though you watched him make no note at all. He walks away, leaving the goat exactly where it was, which feels like a metaphor for his entire career. By the time the sun begins its slow descent, the reeve has completed what he calls his rounds. He gathers a small crowd in the square and clears his throat. "The village remains secure," he announces, "though vigilance must be maintained." His voice is solemn, his stance heroic. You glance at the fences, the gates, the sagging cart, the smug goat, and suppress a laugh that threatens to break free. The villagers nod as though reassured, though everyone knows nothing has been accomplished. You stand there, shifting uncomfortably in your clogs, and realize with dawning horror that this is a job, a paid position. He gets food, maybe even extra bread, for strolling about pointing at problems he never intends to solve. You stare at him, at his quill, at his pristine notebook, and think about your blistered hands from beet pulling, your aching back from hauling water, your humiliation at the river, and you wonder, what if you applied? Could you walk with that same authority, declaring the obvious and scribbling nothing? Could you stand at a fence and say, "Yes, a fence," with conviction? Could you wave your hand and proclaim, "All in due course," while doing absolutely nothing? The answer, deep down, is yes. Yes, you could. And the temptation bites harder than hunger. The reeve closes his speech with a nod, as though blessing his people, then heads home, likely to nap in comfort while the rest of the village continues to fix the very things he inspected. You watch him go, a figure of false gravity, and realize he has perfected the art of surviving the Middle Ages with zero competence. For a moment, just one dangerous moment, you envy him. The bell rings at dawn, not the usual dull clang of morning chores, but a frantic, uneven peal that rattles through the village like someone trying to warn of fire. You leap up from your straw bed, heart hammering, expecting catastrophe. Instead, when you stumble into the square, you find villagers already draping garlands of weeds over fence posts and hanging ribbons from the sagging church door. Someone yells, "Festival Day," and the entire village cheers. You ask what exactly is being celebrated, but no one answers with words. Only more cheering, more ribbons, more bread tossed casually into the air like confetti. It becomes clear within minutes that no one actually knows why this day exists. One woman insists it commemorates a saint who defeated a bear. Another swears it's about the harvest. A third mutters it's for the sun, or maybe the moon, depending on who you ask. A man carrying a jug of ale declares it's for the goat, and the goat itself, standing smugly by the well, bleats as if in agreement. You quickly realize the truth. This festival is less about history and more about an excuse to stop working, drink too early, and invent chaos. The square fills with pies first. Pies appear on tables. Pies appear in hands. Pies appear out of nowhere, steaming and mysterious. Some smell of apples, some of onions, some of things you cannot identify and would rather not. The crusts range from golden to charred, the fillings from sweet to suspicious. A child runs past you holding a pie the size of their head, dropping globs of what might be turnip onto your shoes. You try to ask where all these pies came from, but are met only with more shouting, "Festival Day," music begins, or something that aspires to music. A man drags a bow across a fiddle like he's sawing wood. Another bangs a drum that is definitely just an overturned bucket. Someone blows into a reed pipe and produces a sound that makes a dog howl in agony. Still, the villagers dance. They dance with wild abandon, stomping and spinning, grabbing each other's hands until the square becomes a blur of dirt and laughter. You are dragged into the whirl, spun by someone who smells of onions, then shoved toward another who clutches you until your ribs creak. You stumble, clogs clacking, vision spinning, until you're released back into the chaos, breathless and dazed. At some point, someone shouts that the goat must be crowned. You think it's a joke until you see a wreath of cabbage leaves placed ceremoniously upon the goat's head. The villagers bow, clap, and chant. For a brief and glorious 20 minutes, the goat is declared mayor. People approach it with grievances, broken fences, bad bread, missing chickens, and bow deeply before its vacant stare. The goat chews its wreath and then relieves itself directly in front of the crowd. The villagers cheer louder. You watch this unfold with a mix of horror and awe. The reeve stands nearby, notebook clutched under his arm, clearly unsettled that his authority has been usurped by livestock. He pretends to make a note, but his hand trembles as the goat receives more applause in 20 minutes than he has in 20 years. You consider saluting the goat just to see what happens. Games begin next, though games is generous. One involves chasing a greased pig through the square. Another involves blindfolded men trying to hit a hanging sack with sticks, which would be less concerning if the sack didn't contain live eels. Children throw cabbages at each other until someone cries, at which point they throw harder. You are shoved into a contest that seems to involve shouting compliments at the loudest possible volume. Your hair is like hay. Someone screams at you. You yell back. Your face is very existent. The crowd applauds. The pies return mid-afternoon, this time weaponized. A man takes a custard pie directly to the chest and falls theatrically into the mud. Another gets one to the face and declares himself dead. Soon, pies are flying everywhere. You duck one, only to take another squarely to the back of your head. The filling slides down your neck, sticky and hot. The villagers roar with laughter. You try to wipe it off, but your hands only smear it worse. For a moment, you consider screaming. Instead, you sigh and accept that this is your life now, humiliated by pastry. By dusk, the goat's term as mayor ends unceremoniously when it wanders off toward the beet fields. The villagers sigh wistfully, as though a golden age has passed. The reeve immediately steps forward to reclaim his authority, but no one listens. They are too busy lighting torches and singing a song that contains only 2 words. Festival Day, repeated endlessly until your ears ring. The fires crackle, the pies diminish, the ale flows, and the music grows louder, more chaotic, more desperate. You sit on the edge of the square, sticky with custard, aching from being spun too many times, and watch the madness swirl. Children collapse in the dirt, exhausted. Old women clap off beat, shouting rumors into the night. A man climbs onto a barrel and recites a story about wrestling a fish, which no one believes but everyone cheers. And you realize that the reason for the festival doesn't matter. They don't need one. It is an excuse to eat, to drink, to laugh, to escape the endless weight of toil for a single day. You lean back against the wall, staring up at the sky, where the stars flicker faintly above the smoke. Someone shoves a pie into your lap. You don't ask what's in it. You take a bite. It tastes like onions and something else, something you cannot name. You chew anyway. Somewhere in the distance, the goat bleats, its cabbage crown long since devoured. The crowd roars in reply. Festival Day, apparently, has no end. Night in the village does not arrive gently. It drops like a sack of stones, smothering the fields in shadows and turning every tree into something that looks like it wants to murder you. Smoke drifts from the few chimneys still working. mingling with the thick smell of sweat, mud, and livestock that never truly leaves. Torches sputter to life around the square, their flames coughing against the damp air. The laughter from festival day still lingers in the corners, but now it has softened into the kind of chuckling that comes after too much ale and not enough self-control. You sit on a low stool, trying to collect yourself after a day spent dodging pies and watching a goat govern with more charisma than the reeve. Your throat is dry, your tongue like leather. You stagger toward the barrel where you drank earlier, the same barrel that had seemed so refreshingly clean and blessed by cool water when the sun was high. Now, as you approach, you stop dead in your tracks. A row of villagers has gathered around it, shoes and stockings already tossed aside, lowering their grimy, blistered feet into the very same water you gulped down by the mouthful. Mud streaks into the barrel, followed by bits of straw, followed by toenails that gleam too pale in the torchlight. The water darkens by the second, turning into a stew of filth. One woman sighs deeply as though it is the spa treatment of her dreams. Another wiggles her toes with bliss, sending ripples through the muck. You gag quietly and step back before anyone notices. The sound of sneezing interrupts your horror. A man seated by the fire erupts with such force that sparks leap into the air. Everyone gasps, waiting to see if this is an omen, but he wipes his nose with the back of his hand and declares proudly, "A blessing, a sign of health." The crowd nods with approval, though you watch droplets glisten in the firelight and wonder if you've just witnessed the medieval origin of plague season. The man sneezes again, directly into the flames, and several people applaud as if he's performed a miracle. Dinner, if it can be called that, drags on in chunks of bread, too stale to bite cleanly, and a thin broth that tastes suspiciously like yesterday's dishwater reheated for variety. People sit close together, bodies pressed shoulder to shoulder, the smell of onions, sweat, and damp wool hanging heavy in the air. You try to edge away, but the space is too cramped, and soon someone is resting their elbow on your knee as though you're just another stool. Conversation buzzes with the same themes: goats, crops, and who might have flirted too long by the well. The laughter is constant, loud, and careless. You find yourself longing for silence, for the kind of stillness that doesn't smell like other people's feet. When the fire dies low and the last songs of the day dissolve into yawns, the villagers retreat to their homes. You shuffle back to your allotted corner where your straw bed awaits. It is no softer than it was this morning, stiff, uneven, and alive with the restless movement of fleas who have claimed ownership. You lower yourself down, wincing as the straw scratches through your tunic, and feel the immediate prickle of tiny legs marching up your skin. You tell yourself it's fine, that you're used to it now, that you'll sleep anyway. You whisper these lies to yourself, because the alternative is screaming. You curl into the straw, pulling a thin blanket over your shoulders. The room is dark, except for the faint glow of embers in the hearth. You listen to the soft wheeze of someone else snoring nearby, the occasional cough, the scuttle of something that might be a mouse, or worse, across the floorboards. You scratch at your arm, then your ankle, then your neck, until you realize you are scratching everywhere, fleas launching an all-out campaign against your sanity. You close your eyes and picture your old bed. Sheets clean, pillow soft, no movement beneath you except your own shifting body. You cling to the memory like it's a relic, though it only makes the present worse. The blanket smells of mildew, your hair feels gritty with the day's dust, and every inch of your skin insists on itching at once. Somewhere outside, the goat bleats. Someone laughs drunkenly in response. You sigh, nestling deeper into the scratchy bedding, fleas tickling your scalp like tiny drumbeats. This, you remind yourself bitterly, is life now. Feet in your drinking barrel, sneezes celebrated as holy acts, and a bed that chews on you while you try to sleep. You pull the blanket tighter, bury your face, and pretend it's fine. It isn't. The tavern sits low to the ground, half hidden under its sagging roof, a place that smells of smoke, sweat, and secrets long before you even step inside. You push open the door, and the air hits you, thick, damp, and so heavy with ale fumes that you could get drunk simply by breathing too deeply. A fire smolders in the hearth, coughing sparks into the haze, while men and women crowd onto benches, their elbows pressed close, their mugs sloshing with every movement. The floor is sticky, the ceiling beams sag under the weight of soot, and yet there's an energy here that pulls you in, like gravity. Someone thrusts a mug into your hands before you've even found a seat. It's filled with ale, though calling it ale feels generous. You take a cautious sip, and it tastes like someone tried to ferment a loaf of bread, got bored halfway through, then strained it through a sock. It's warm, flat, and tinged with despair. You force it down because refusing would be noticed, and being noticed in a tavern full of people looking for a story is dangerous. You squeeze onto a bench between a man whose beard drips into his cup and another whose breath smells like onions and regret. They slap you on the back, nearly spilling your drink, and shout greetings loud enough to rattle your ribs. Music begins in the corner, if you can call it music. A fiddler screeches his way through a tune while a drummer bangs on something that might once have been a pot, and yet the crowd joins in, stomping their feet until the whole room trembles. Stories erupt like sparks from the fire. A man with a scar down his cheek swears he fought off 3 wolves with nothing but a stick. Another insists he once courted a duchess, though his missing teeth and mud-stained tunic tell another story. Each tale grows taller as the ale flows faster. The villagers clap, cheer, and interrupt with their own boasts until the entire tavern becomes one sprawling competition of who can outlie whom without breaking a sweat. You laugh when they laugh, nod when they nod, desperately trying to blend in, though the ale in your mug keeps betraying you with its foul taste. Midway through a particularly loud song about a knight who apparently wooed a fish, the details blur with every verse. The man beside you slumps against your shoulder. His snores drown out the fiddle. His mug tips sideways, and warm ale drips onto your leg. You freeze, unsure whether to shove him off or let him drool in peace. The rest of the tavern pays no attention. This, apparently, is normal. You sit stiffly, a human pillow, while his head grows heavier and his breath rattles in your ear like a dying bellows. Across the room, a commotion breaks out. 2 men clear a table, sweeping mugs and crumbs to the floor, and set a chicken on top. The bird flaps once, indignant but not alarmed. A man, red-faced and already too deep into his cups, slams his elbow onto the table and growls, "I'll best it." The crowd roars approval. The chicken tilts its head, unimpressed. The match begins. The man grips the bird's claw, muttering about destiny. The chicken pecks at his hand with sharp precision, and he yelps but holds firm. The crowd chants, stomping in rhythm, shaking the entire tavern with their glee. The man strains, his arm trembling, face red as a beet. The chicken, with the calm of a creature that knows no defeat, pushes down once, sharp and decisive. The man's fist smacks the table. The chicken wins. The tavern explodes in laughter. People slap the table, stomp the floor, and cheer for the victorious bird. The man slinks back, nursing his hand, while someone crowns the chicken with a wilted garland. You stare in disbelief as it struts proudly, wings flapping, receiving more applause than the reeve has ever commanded. For one surreal moment, the chicken looks directly at you, and you wonder if you're witnessing the rise of another feathered leader destined for temporary office. The music swells again, louder, drunker. Someone begins a ballad about the time a barrel rolled uphill, which no one believes but everyone sings anyway. The air grows hotter, heavier, until sweat drips from your brow and your clothes cling to your skin. The ale continues to flow, mugs clashing in toasts, foam spilling across the sticky tables. You sip again, wincing at the taste, but it hardly matters now. The tavern has swallowed you whole, and whether you like it or not, you are part of its stories. The man still snores against your shoulder, drool soaking your sleeve, but no one notices. The fiddler misses half his notes. The drummer loses the rhythm, but no one cares. The chicken preens under torchlight, feathers gleaming, and everyone laughs as though the world has never been cruel. For a moment, you almost believe it. When the fire finally burns low and the songs dissolve into slurred mumbling, you stumble out into the night. The air outside is sharp and cool, a slap compared to the stifling heat of the tavern. Behind you, laughter still echoes, muffled by stone walls. You smell of ale, smoke, and chicken feathers that weren't even yours. You look up at the stars, dizzy from noise and drink, and realize the truth. The ale was terrible. The stories were better, and the chicken will be remembered long after you're forgotten. The tavern's warmth still lingers in your skin as you stumble back to your corner of the world, that straw bed waiting like a cruel joke. Your clothes smell of smoke, your sleeves still damp from another man's drool, and somewhere deep in your gut, the ale churns like a storm that regrets being brewed. You lower yourself into the straw, muttering promises of sleep, but the straw has no sympathy. It pokes, it scratches, it rustles like a chorus of paper-cut demons. You pull the blanket over you anyway, praying exhaustion will drown out the discomfort. But the night is not merciful. First, the rats. They arrive in squads, their claws tapping across the floorboards like drunken musicians who never learned rhythm. They scurry along the walls, pause, then dart into the open, their shadows leaping large in the dying glow of the embers. One clambers onto the beam above you and stares down, whiskers twitching, tail dragging like a whip. You whisper, "No," to it, as though reasoning with a rat has ever worked. It blinks slowly, unimpressed, then vanishes into the dark. You try to tell yourself it's gone, but seconds later, another skitters across your foot. You curl into yourself, teeth clenched, praying the fleas stick to biting you instead of joining forces with the rats. The room grows hot, then cold, then hot again, as if even the air cannot decide how best to torment you. Your body aches, your skin itches, and every creak of the wood makes you think something larger than rats is lurking. You shut your eyes tight, force yourself to drift, and for a moment it almost works. Then the rooster crows, not at dawn, not at the first blush of sunrise. At 2 a.m, its shrill cry splits the silence, high and ragged, like it's laughing directly at your misery. You groan, bury your head in the straw, but the rooster calls again, louder this time, joined by a second, as if harmony makes it better. Somewhere outside, a man yells half-heartedly for them to shut up, but the birds ignore him, continuing their concert of spite. They crow again and again, until the sound worms its way into your bones. Sleep becomes an act of rebellion. You force your mind elsewhere, dragging it toward dreams, modern dreams, warm, fragrant, ridiculous dreams. You find yourself in a glowing kitchen, pizza fresh from the oven, crust golden, cheese bubbling in lazy rivers. The smell wraps around you, the tang of tomatoes, the richness of garlic butter, the melt of mozzarella stretching in perfect strings. You sink your teeth into a slice, hot and soft, grease coating your lips. You chew slowly, luxuriously, every bite a hymn, and then you wake, jaws working furiously, only to realize you are chewing straw, bitter, dry, dust-coated straw. You spit, gagging, coughing as flecks of it cling to your tongue. Your stomach, already offended by medieval stew and bread that doubles as masonry, roils in protest. You roll over, groaning, pulling the blanket tighter as if suffocation might be preferable. The rats return. You hear them scrabbling beneath the bed, gnawing at something unseen, their tiny teeth grinding like distant thunder. One squeaks, high-pitched and triumphant. You mutter curses into your blanket, words from a language the villagers wouldn't understand, but even your fury feels weak against their persistence. They own the night, and you are just the guest they tolerate. The rooster crows again. Another joins. The sound drills into your skull until you imagine strangling them both with your bare hands. But in the village, the rooster is sacred. It marks the time, however poorly. If you kill it, you'll be branded as cursed, maybe even executed, and you're fairly certain execution would involve something worse than sleep deprivation. So you lie there, twitching with every rat, flinching with every crow, your mind circling endlessly around the dream of pizza, the hot ooze of cheese, the crackle of crust. You know it will never come. Not here. Not now. You are centuries away from even the concept of it. Instead, you have bread that doubles as a weapon, and porridge that doubles as building mortar. You press your hand to your stomach and try not to cry. The night drags. Time stretches until it feels like it no longer belongs to you. Each hour is marked not by rest, but by noises. The shuffle of rats, the crow of roosters, the cough of your neighbor, the faint gurgle of your own stomach betraying you. You close your eyes again, hoping for even a fragment of sleep, but every time you drift, a squeak or crow yanks you back into the present. Eventually, you stop fighting. You stare into the dark, straw scratching your cheek, and accept that the night is endless. You will not sleep. You will not dream of pizza again. You will only endure, minute by clawed minute, until the faintest gray creeps across the window and signals another day in this mud-stained nightmare. When the rooster crows once more, triumphant and maddening, you don't even flinch. You just lie there, wide-eyed, chewing straw in your sleep-starved delirium, and pretend that somewhere in another world, someone is biting into the slice you deserve. Dawn comes without mercy. The first pale light slips across the floor, catching the dust in the air and turning every particle into a reminder of how unclean you are. Your body feels heavy, stiff, as if the straw bed has conspired with gravity to pin you down. You ache everywhere, from your blistered feet to your shoulders rubbed raw by rough fabric. Your tongue is dry, coated in a film of medieval despair. You are not just tired. You are undone. You stagger upright, clothes clinging with sweat and river stink, hair matted into something between a bird's nest and a cry for help. You drag yourself outside into the cool morning air, hoping it might revive you. It doesn't. The village is already alive, bustling as though yesterday's madness never ended. Women carry buckets to the well, men curse over broken tools, and children chase each other through the mud with sticks that will undoubtedly become swords in their stories. Life continues, unbothered by your ruin. The chickens are the first to notice you. They cluster around your ankles, muttering with sharp, judgmental clucks. Their eyes gleam with the kind of intelligence that makes you uneasy, like they know you've been bested by one of their kind in an arm wrestling contest. A cow lowing in the distance turns its head just enough to look at you, and somehow the gaze feels personal. You can almost hear it sigh. You don't belong here. Brother Cuthbert passes by, carrying a bundle of freshly carved spoons, each handle sprouting faces more unsettling than the last. He doesn't acknowledge you directly, just mutters something about souls unfit for wood and shuffles on. His spoons rattle against each other, chattering like teeth. You shiver. Nearby, the reeve struts through the square, notebook tucked under his arm as usual, quill still useless, declaring fences adequate and pigs unruly. The villagers nod along, though no one expects him to lift a finger. For a moment, you imagine yourself stealing his job, but the thought evaporates as quickly as your strength. Even his brand of empty importance requires more stamina than you have left. The air smells of smoke and bread, though the bread is already burned, and the smoke clings to your throat. The baker waves from his doorway, his face streaked with soot. He looks cheerful, despite holding a loaf so charred it could be used as a weapon. You wave back weakly, then nearly collapse under the weight of your own arm. Everywhere you turn, the world is too much. The gossip at the well, sharp as knives. The sound of children shrieking, shrill as war horns. The relentless braying of the donkey, its voice scraping through your bones. The fleas have not abandoned you, biting with renewed energy, as though dawn is their breakfast bell. You scratch absent-mindedly, eyes bleary, wondering if this is how madness begins. You think of the food you've endured. Porridge like mortar, stew like sorrow, bread like a weapon, pies weaponized in the square. You think of the water turned into a communal footbath, of the ale that tasted like bread boiled badly, of the rooster's spiteful crow at 2 a.m. You think of the goose, the goat, the chicken, all more powerful than you in their own absurd ways. You realize, with a sinking clarity, that you are not built for this. Not the labor, not the smells, not the constant threat of ridicule delivered by both animals and humans alike. A child runs past with a beat, shouting triumphantly as though it's treasure. Another follows, hurling a turnip with surprising accuracy. It smacks into your shin, hard enough to sting. They laugh and run on, leaving you clutching your leg in silence. This is the final straw. Not the fleas, not the food, not even the rooster. It's the turnip to the shin that breaks you. You sink down on a step, head in your hands, and admit defeat. You did not make it. You lasted 1 day, barely. You survived the fleas, the gossip, the goat mare, the spoon monk, the tavern chicken, and the laundry gauntlet, but the sum of them has ground you down to nothing. The village carries on around you, oblivious to your collapse, as though you were never truly part of it. Life here does not pause for weakness. It churns forward, dirty and loud, leaving you behind. You close your eyes, desperate for escape, and when you open them again, you are back. Back in the present. The sounds of chickens and gossip replaced by the hum of appliances, the ping of Wi-Fi, the gentle whir of something electrical you will never again take for granted. Your body is still itchy, your stomach unsettled, but your bathroom waits with toothpaste, hot water, and soap that does not smell like ashes. Your bed waits, soft, clean, blissfully flea-free. You stumble toward it, collapsing onto the mattress with a groan of gratitude. Your phone glows on the nightstand, a portal to comfort, distraction, and human connection. You clutch it like a relic, thumb already hovering over the screen, and for the first time in 24 hours, though it felt like centuries, you breathe out, relieved. You didn't last a day in medieval times, but you made it back to Wi-Fi,